put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on...
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something. Right. And you say, what? And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I am all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting. You know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say you support some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message. But I do appreciate the message. Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. In a few moments' time, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with social commentator Jim Dale and also former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Before we get started, though, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Good afternoon. It's exactly 1 minute past 3. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top story this hour. Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead the war must stop now. But he says the ceasefire can't be one-sided. He's calling on the Hamas terror group to release all its remaining hostages. He also said that a two-state solution must be back on the table.
An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. a ceasefire that lasts. Conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
Well, in the United States, the White House has blamed inaction by Republicans for Russia's capture of another Ukrainian city. Kyiv ordered the withdrawal of troops from the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday, giving Moscow its first major gain since last year. Joe Biden had warned that a shortage of ammunition could see the city fall into Russian hands as he pushed Congress to agree more military aid. President Putin has called it an important victory. Former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram told us Ukraine needs more support.
Loss of Avdiivka is significant. The Ukrainians have been holding on to that since 2014 and fighting the Russians. But they've made the sensible military decision not to sacrifice any more of their troops to keep this completely decimated piece of territory. The Russians are making some advances from a one-dimensional perspective on the front line, but these advances are tiny at the moment, and it's purely because Russia has got more ammunition from North Korea and from Iran. And the Ukrainians are suffering a shortage of ammunition coming from the West.
Well, Russian authorities have been accused of doing everything they can to avoid handing over Mr. Navalny's body to his family. Yesterday, the 69-year-old mother of Vladimir Putin's most vocal critic visited the remote penal colony where he died. She says she was told his body had been taken to a nearby morgue, but when she arrived, it was closed. Meanwhile, in London, tributes are continuing today at the Russian embassy as people gather to lay flowers and messages for Mr. Navalny. His spokespeople claim his death was orchestrated murder by the Russian president. That's been rejected by the Kremlin. Well, 2 people have now been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. 34-year-old Lucia Whitaker de Abreu has been charged with failing to remove a face covering. 48-year-old Martin Prady is accused of obstructing a police constable. It comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. Well, 2 ministers have written to police chiefs to express concerns over the safety of politicians amid increased protests. Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and Policing Minister Chris Philp took the unusual step after pro-Palestinian activists gathered outside the home of Tory MP Tobias Ellwood. It comes as reports in the Daily Mail suggest that Just Stop Oil activists are planning to occupy the homes of MPs, with one protester reportedly telling a journalist that the group is ready to, quote, look a bit loony. Well, the King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church in Sandringham this morning. Braving the wet weather, His Majesty and the Queen clutched umbrellas in their first public outing since Prince Harry's interview on US television. The Duke of Sussex is said to be willing to undertake some royal duties while his father undergoes treatment for cancer, though there's reportedly been no changes to current arrangements. And finally, Britain's brightest stars are putting on their Sunday best today ahead of the BAFTAs this evening. The nuclear bomb epic Oppenheimer is leading the pack with 13 nominations, including Best Film. Elsewhere, The Crown star Claire Foy is up for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the heartfelt drama All of Us Strangers. Her co-star, Paul Mescal, is also up for a gong, though the film's lead, Andrew Scott, was notably snubbed. Sophie Ellis-Bextor will perform her 2001 hit Murder on the Dance Floor after it re-entered the charts, thanks to a much-talked-about scene in the film Saltburn, which is also up for 5 awards. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It is fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into our debates over the next hour, joining me for the clash today is social commentator Jim Dale and also former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Right, so here's what's coming up in the clash this hour. They'll be going head-to-head over the Labour Party, Donald Trump, private schools and the Falkland Islands. So Keir Starmer, is he right to criticise a former US president over his comments on NATO? We could see Starmer in number 10 and Trump in the White House this time next year. So shouldn't he be maybe a bit more, diplomatic, perhaps, do you think? And whilst we're on it, Labour, are they right to slap that on private schools? Also, has the right to protest gone too far, with pro-Palestinian protesters protesting outside Sir Tobias Ellwood's house? Is that just a little bit too much? Is this more like harassment rather than protest? What do you think? And how do we stop it if that's the case? And Lord Cameron says that there's no debate to be had. The Falklands are British. He's going to be paying them a visit, but lots of people are urging Britain to negotiate their status. Should we even budge over this, or should we give them back? That's coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's kick off the clash with this, because earlier we heard from the People's Panel in Nottingham about the issues affecting them. Will Hollis was hosting. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
We brought you the People's Panel from Lenton in Nottingham today because you can't speak about politics without hearing the voice of ordinary and extraordinary local people. Today we had Michael McKeever, a retired head teacher, Catherine Bohm, who is a local landlady, and Jeff Hampson, who's a veteran and supports other veterans too. We spoke about three things in particular. We spoke about illegal immigration, we spoke about the Labour Party and Britain's place in a dangerous international world. Yeah, Michael McKeever, you're a retired head teacher. Lots to go off, but what did you take away from what you heard today on Camilla's programme?
Very disappointed to listen again to politicians not answering questions, first of all. Also to think on a sadder, kind of more global scale, that talking about Gaza and Russia, what worries me is the apparent impotence of the West to do anything about it. And at the same time, we've got this immense sadness at the death of Alex Navalny, and I feel sorry for the Russian people. It's kind of an extinction of hope for them, and that's the worrying thing I take away from this morning.
Michael, looking at the bigger picture, but here we are in Britain, a small island nation. Catherine, you're a landlady. You came into this thinking about illegal migration. What did you hear from the illegal immigration minister?
Well, nothing really different to what we were expecting. 1.3% have been returned back. We need to deal with things at France. That's the only point that we need to deal with. Everybody's getting over here, so we really, really need to work hard with France to stop the illegal boats, because there's people dying at the end of the day, and it's not fair for those that are coming over, and we're just housing everybody. And earlier on we said about the veterans, we need to consider veterans as well for homes, so let's start looking at the veterans over here for homes more than anything.
Looking after Brits by building a better relationship with France. Jeff, you work with veterans, you're a veteran yourself, but you're also a Labour supporter. We've had the Shadow Minister on today. What do you think of Labour? How well are they doing? In the build-up to a general election, they've had two big by-election wins in the last week.
I think they're doing a fantastic job. Having met Sir Keir personally, great guy, very sincere in what he's doing, and I'm sure he will sort anti-Semitism and everything out, and Labour will win the next election. Our local candidate in Bassetlaw, Councillor Jo White, is doing very, very well. She's a workaholic. She's always on the streets, knocking on doors, getting things done for Bassetlaw.
And that's in the Red Wall, Bassetlaw. The Red Wall, Nottinghamshire and the Midlands, went to the Conservatives in 2019. But Jeff, a Labour supporter, is really hopeful that they'll get back in. It's ultimately the voice of the people that we need to hear, because it's the people who vote in our elections, and we've got a big one coming up, expected by the end of this year. So every time you tune in to Sunday Morning Politics on GB News, you can hear from our People's Panel too.
Well, there we go. There's a lot of subjects that we'll dealt with there. So let's get started. Let's welcome again to my clashes social commentator Jim Dale and former UKIP leader and president of the Primrose League, Henry Bolton. Right, so let's get some reaction to the People's Panel in what Catherine said about how few illegal migrants have been returned since they landed in Britain. Just 1.3%. Is that enough, Jim? Is that enough? 1.3%?
And there is the problem. The problem is that they're here and they're going nowhere, and so you've got to ask yourself why. It's not the fact that...
why are they here or why are they going nowhere? Which one are you answering?
Why are they going nowhere? Because that contingent of asylum seekers will be made up with illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, and legal asylum seekers.
Well, no, they're all illegal.
To the point of... No,
you mean people on the boats?
Let me make the point, yeah. The point is it's the processing that's the problem. The bit in the middle, if you like, the huge bit. If you take public money away from this area, which has happened in the last 10, 12 years, then you're not going to process the people who come over here. For example, people from Afghanistan who supported us in Afghanistan, fought with us, have come over and they find themselves in the same logjam as people who are truly illegal and should be put back. And there lies in the problem. If you take public money away from that process, then you end up with a logjam. You end up with people being shunted from a hotel to ship to this to that. And henceforth you have the reason, and that's where we are.
Well, you say that, but if you could stop some of them from coming across on the boats at source, that would be good. But also, you talk about the processing. The Home Office were processing, I think it was 9 applicants a week. It's absurd. Henry Bolton.
Well, the whole process from start to finish is flawed. There is no strategy, there is no comprehensive or integrated planning. We are not connecting the diplomatic effort to stop the movement in the first place and support out there with the crime-fighting element, interdicting the movement and the criminal gangs all along the route, and we're not dealing with what's happening actually at the Channel, on the North French coast and on the Channel. And when these people arrive in the UK, we've got no real coherent plan for that either. I mean, just for an example on that, if I may quickly, and I've said this before, I think, if you land at, I don't know, Stansted, I think most people understand that they have not arrived in the UK for immigration purposes until they've transited immigration controls. We don't have that legal or physical facility on our maritime borders. Why not? It's not rocket science. And you can actually detain people under the UN Convention on Refugees. You can detain people who have entered illegally, even if they've entered in order to claim asylum. And then why is it? And I don't know. I'm an expert in borders, and I don't know why it is that the Home Office was able years ago to send probably about tenfold more immigrants back than they are now. Have we reneged on some agreements?
No, do you know I've got to answer that for you, Henry, now.
Please do.
It's become an industry of lawyers, charities supposedly care for Calais, and they are literally instructing the migrants on how they can evade being sent back.
Just like most of the public sector in terms of it going downhill, this is one of the sectors that has gone downhill as well at the same speed.
Which one?
In terms of the processing, etc. Because it's done by the public sector. That's the people who work in the public sector. If you take that away, then there is nothing then to process these people, to actually look at them and get... I don't think these particular people want to be sitting in hotels or on ships or wherever they happen to be. That's not their choice, OK? They're coming over here...
Well, hang on, no, it is their choice. Some of them are making the choice because they realise it's a better choice than where they are.
But they don't want to stay where they are. They want to be processed, or they want to escape, if you're looking at the illegals, in which case they should be processed more quickly and sent back. That's what should be happening.
I think, actually, Jim has a point, because back in 2010, we know that the Conservative government cut policing by 21,000.
Yeah.
That was very obvious. That was a very public-facing kind of public service, the police. What was not seen was the fact that they had equal cuts across the immigration and asylum system. And now, and to be fair, at that time, there wasn't the same pressure that there is now. 2014, it started ramping up. What didn't happen was that the government did not start to match that increase in demand, immigration coming in, including asylum seekers, in the back of trucks, first of all, and then boats, didn't match it with putting the resources back into the system. And then, finally, when they did, they've outsourced it to people. The money isn't there, the training standards aren't there, so the people processing, responsible for making the decisions and enacting the process, aren't sufficiently trained or aware of what
I think you're... No, I think you're excusing these people.
I'm
a
not,
lot of them...
There's no...
Let's not forget the political motivation of some of these people.
If the will was there, it would be done.
Because the political motivation... We've heard from a lot of these. We've heard from, I think it's Mark Sorotzko, who is head of the PCS, and they're the union that cover all the civil servants and people like that, and obviously people who are in the Home Office. And it was a political motivation, which he actually said that they're going to try and bring this country to a halt by multiple strikes so they can get rid of the government. And that's one of the things that he said. So I think we don't forget the political motivation.
But to solve this
let me come to Jim.
Jim saying there's small elements of that, and there will always be different things things that make up the big picture, if that makes sense.
Well, you're talking about processing,
take you
so
back.
that's why I've come
Well,
to
processing,
that
I think, is the biggest, but there's another one as well, and that's at source, why these people come from where they come. Now, some are legitimate. For example, I mentioned the Afghan war and what happened there and the difficulty in getting out, and those people who supported the army and others. But there are things that we can look at source, not just in the UK,
like
but
what?
the world. Well, look, you can see what goes on in some of the third world countries in terms of the desperate states that exist. We have to support them, so there is no reason and rhyme to necessarily come across.
No. Listen, I think you've bought into... You're buying into this sub-story, and all this in a sense, somewhat almost like a sort of white saviour complex that seems to be coming over you. But there are some countries, in the third world that you call, and I'm presuming you're talking about parts of Africa, that are incredibly wealthy. So, and just like this country, there are poor bits and wealthy bits. But you need at least £5 to get across, Jim. So where are they getting that money from then?
And I agree with what you say, Nana. What I'm trying to say is these are the structural problems. If you want to overcome the structural problems, then you need the political will and the determination and the knowledge as to how to do it. If you don't have the political will, then it's not going to happen, and that's the problem with the government.
I would say that to you there, so I don't believe the government have the political will. I think there's an element of it that they kind of want that cheap labour that they were addicted to with the workers from the EU, and they're not really considering the British people. But who's got the answer? It certainly isn't the Labour Party. The Tories have had their chance. There's only one party, I think, that might do it, but what do you think? GBViews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Joining me now, Jim Dale and Henry Bolton. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Coming up, should we ever negotiate over the Falkland Islands? But up next, what's Starmer playing at? Is it smart for him to attack comments made by potentially the next President of the United States?
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous, at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 22 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is The Clash. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 22 minutes after 3 o'clock. Right, so Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has verbally attacked former US President Donald Trump. I don't know how wise that was, for criticising NATO members. Now, the leader of the opposition has pledged that he'd stand up for our allies if he were to become Prime Minister. And this comes after Mr Trump suggested that he'd encourage Russia to attack any NATO members that failed to spend enough on defence. So that was 2% of their GDP, which was the requirement to be a member of NATO. So was Sir Keir Starmer right to take a swipe at Donald Trump, or is he damaging UK-US relations before he's even begun? Well, let's see what Henry Bolton and also you, Jim Dale, make of that. I'm going to start with Henry Bolton because you are, well, you know all about border force and stuff like that. And
I'm ex-military.
And you're ex-military.
I actually think that deterrence, preventing war and deterring potential aggressors and enemies is all about conveying the clear message that it would be eye-wateringly and unacceptably painful for them to take us on. Yeah. And I think anything that undermines that message is undermining deterrence and, in some cases, therefore making war more likely, not less. And I understand entirely what Donald Trump was trying to say. He was trying to say, if you want to defend yourselves, you're going to have to pay for it because you can't just rely on the United States to back you up, because, you know, it's not fair that we bear the cost, both in treasure and in blood, for protecting you. It's a team effort, and you need to carry your weight in that. I totally support that, and that's about the 2% of GDP that NATO members have pledged to spend. I don't think it's enough, by the way, in present circumstances. But I get the message. I think the messaging was wrong, though. I think, you know, what he did was he signalled to Putin that, actually, you know what, I might not support the Dutch or somebody else.
Well, you say that, but after that, half of the members, he's not even the president yet,
correct,
and half of the members then paid up their 2%. So they were ready to pay up. So what was he supposed to do? Softly, softly, please, please?
No,
if you
no,
you don't pay an insurance premium, you need to know that when your house floods, then you go to your insurance company and say, yeah, but I paid some of it last month. They'll say, yeah, but you didn't pay this month, so forget it. And that is a reality.
Yeah, but we're trying to prevent war.
That's what I said. That's why I gave an example of an insurance premium.
But the insurance isn't about warfare, and it's
no, but
forgive me, it's not an effective and it's not the right anatomy.
No, I think it is the right.
It's not, because what we shouldn't be saying is that America is the insurance company. No, NATO has worked because we all come into it together.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying paying your premium is your insurance, and America are not the people behind that premium. Everybody's equal, but everyone should pay the premium. Jim Dale.
No clash, Henry, on this one at all.
Well, I won't bring you back.
You're absolutely well. No, you're absolutely correct.
You ain't coming back. Get rid of him. Get rid of him.
Who needs enemies when you've got friends like Trump? In other words, what's that about other than undermining?
He's talking about the premium.
Not so much the premium, but as Henry said, it's his language. It's the way he actually advocates it. It's almost like he's supporting Putin. And if you go back to the last election when he got elected, there was a lot of talk about support from Putin for him and the way that might have happened through social media and other things. And this is what's kind of happening now. It's almost like payback time to a certain degree.
There's
a general election. No, I haven't.
You've misunderstood it then.
I've not misunderstood it.
You've misunderstood it.
I understand that he's asking for EU nations
Did it work?
Well, it's only a few days.
Well, a lot of them paid up.
I'll tell you what it didn't do. It didn't put the countries in the EU on his side very favourably. I don't suppose they're there in the first place anyway.
Whose side are they on? Well, they're not paying their premium for NATO.
We're all in NATO together. And by the way, I'm ex-military as well.
If we're all in it together, Jim, why should some of us be paying 2% and others aren't? It's very irritating.
I'm not arguing about that. That point has to be made, and it's a fair point to be made. As Henry said, it's the way it is, and it's the language that's used, And it's almost like he's pitching us against Putin. And when I say us, I mean NATO,
what about
the organisation.
What about Keir Starmer? Was he
well,
right
I think
then?
he's right to point it out. It's as simple as that. Look, he's now... Starmer's getting into a position where he looks as if he will be the next Prime Minister. Let's face that, from the by-elections that have gone, etc. So he's starting to talk more statesmanship-like, and I think that's fair. And when he sees somebody like Trump standing out there and coming up with outlandish statements, which is what he's done, then, yeah, he'll call him out, and I think it's right to do that.
I think he's a fool for doing that. I think he's foolish because actually what Trump did...
The fool is Trump.
What Trump did was effective, and if you rule by like that and it's effective, then that's all that matters. But speaking of Keir Starmer, this is... private schools are blasting Labour for putting the education of vulnerable students at risk. Chief Executive of the Independent Schools Council, Julie Robinson, says that 95,000 children with special educational needs could be displaced due to Labour's tax penalty. And some head teachers are already looking to bolster their finances by attracting more, you guessed it, overseas students and by cutting bursaries and scholarship offers. So is Labour's war on private schools the great leveller Sir Keir Starmer hoped it would be? Jim Dale.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I went to a state school. 93% of this population go to a state school, and I would prefer the money to go there. We're only talking about VAT in this case on private schools. They've escaped for a long, long time from the VAT trap, and it's about time that got turned around and that money goes towards the vast majority of children in this country. That's where it should go, and I'm so pleased that the Labour Party are actually doing this.
I don't think it will work. Henry Bolton, will that actually work?
Will it work? I mean,
will he get the money?
Well, he'll probably get the money from the schools.
Well, you don't know
initially, but it will break a lot of them. And a lot of those schools will close, and then what happens to those children? They have to go to the state education, which then costs us more. So, actually, what's happening at the moment is a lot of the special needs schools are indeed privately funded. They're not publicly funded. So I just don't see this. This is nothing but a political sort of headline that will appear to those people who want to tax the rich.
I'm not even sure it's necessarily aimed at the special needs school. I think you'll find if there's a Labour politician
that's one of the
in here.
effects.
Yeah, well, maybe, but you know when you get into government, you start to do a little bit of twiddling with the dial and making sure that people are going not to be left out. You know what this is aimed at. I think everybody knows what it's aimed at. It's aimed at the Eatons, the Harrows and all the rest of it that have escaped. The schools that Boris Johnson and co have gone to.
Yeah, but so what? They provide effective educations.
Really?
And yes, they do. And they also... They're people who are going to then have to go into the state system, which will cost the government money.
Can we look at the last 14 years of government and say that's a success? Because I don't think so.
Well, that's a different question.
You know,
we're not talking about the education system.
But that's where they came from, so it's not a success necessarily.
But the state system isn't necessarily a success. But we're not talking about the effectiveness of the education system writ large. What we're talking about is what happens to the 95,000 children who are privately educated at the moment. They're going to have to go into the state system. How much is that going to cost?
We're not talking about eradicating. We're talking about adding VAT, taking VAT from certain sectors and putting it into other sectors, swapping it around to a certain degree. So
many of these schools are run as charities anyway. So, look, you know, you're not going to accrue enough VAT from these schools to be able to fund that number of people in the state system. It doesn't balance out. And why are we doing it? What is the purpose here? It's going to cost the government more money in the long run to educate the children whose schools close as a result than than they're going to recoup through the VAT. So, and as those schools close, there will be no VAT.
I think you're guessing that these schools are all going to close. You know, that's almost a scare story. It's the sort of thing that the Telegraph and what have you come up with, because that's what they're scared of, that they're going to lose that little mantle of elitism. Are you going to come back
to me afterwards when they do close and say, well, it was a scare story?
We'll have that conversation in a year's time.
You say that, but these are the people complaining about this are actually people in the private school system who are saying, and they're saying that a lot of these schools might close. That's the point of this.
Might.
So, no, but some of them may well have to, and there's special education needs schools that will get caught in the crossfire of this. And I know, as private schools are very useful tool, and not everybody who sends their child to private school is wealthy. A lot of people are giving up things to do it, and they're paying twice. But if you just tuned in, welcome aboard. It's 31 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. This is The Clash. Coming up, I'll be asking if the right to protest has gone too far after an MP's home was surrounded by pro-Palestinian protesters. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nana. 3:31, our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead the war must stop now. He also said that a two-state solution must be back on the table.
An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts, conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
Well, in the US, the White House has blamed inaction by Republicans for Russia's capture of another Ukrainian city. Kyiv ordered the withdrawal of troops from the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday, giving Moscow its first major gain since last year. Joe Biden had warned Congress that a shortage of ammunition could see the city fall into Russian hands. President Putin has called it an important victory. Well, two people have been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. They're accused of failing to remove a face covering and obstructing a constable. It comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. And the King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church in Sandringham this morning. Braving the wet weather, His Majesty and the Queen clutched umbrellas in their first public outing since Prince Harry's interview on US television. The Duke of Sussex is said to be willing to undertake some royal duties while his father undergoes treatment for cancer, though there's reportedly been no changes to the current arrangements. Right, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Back to Nana.
Thank you. Coming up after the break, the debate continues. What should we do with the Falkland Islands? But next, has the right to protest gone too far?
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and it's clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who, frankly, are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's fine. Welcome aboard. It's GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel. This is The Clash. Now, Bournemouth East MP Tobias Elwood has said democracy is not in a good place as a pro-Palestinian protest took place outside his family home this week. More than 60 people, some holding Palestinian flags, gathered outside his house in Dorset to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, Mr Elwood told GB News, you don't expect this sort of behaviour in today's day and age. We need to make sure it does not become the norm. So has the right to protest gone too far? Well, so joining me for The Clash, I've got former UKIP leader and also, what is it, Primrose League's...
President of the Primrose League.
I don't know what the hell that is. President of the Primrose League, nobody else does, is Henry Bolton.
With flowers.
And also social commentator Jim Dale. Henry Bolton, I'm going to start with you, President of the Primrose League.
www.
Whatever. Right, go on anyway. So has it gone too far?
Well, look, it's a difficult one. I think it is going too far, but it's always been a problem. The Duke of Wellington, who beat Napoleon at Waterloo, he was also later on Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he's known as his nickname was the Iron Duke because he had to put iron shutters over the windows of his house at No. 1 London because the crowds were outside throwing things at his windows. And now, in that case, the militia were brought in to deal with it, but it was an ongoing problem, hence the shutters. It's never going to go away, but I think the police really are absent in this debate. I think the police need to be far more present. It's about their policing of protests generally. They seem to be kowtowing to the, we could call it the woke brigade, but whether it's Just Stop Oil or whether it's Palestinian protesters or whatever, and allowing them to bend the rules, actually break the law quite often because the police don't want to take the issue on.
Do you think they don't know the law? I think some of them don't know the law. They haven't got a clue.
I'm a former police officer as well, and I agree with you.
Do you remember that one? She was a community officer, but told somebody that you can't play Christian songs unless you're outside a church.
I totally agree with you,
like
but it almost goes back to an earlier discussion we were having today. The 20,000 police officers that the Conservatives brought back they didn't bring back the 600 police stations they had closed. They didn't bring back the regional police training college.
And that was a disgrace.
Yeah, but so the training infrastructure as well, the regional training centres were not brought back. A lot of the training is done in civilian universities outside the institutional framework. A lot of it's done through online training modules. It's not, the training process isn't fit for purpose.
Jim Dale.
The right to demonstrate is absolute. The right to demonstrate outside somebody's house, absolutely not.
Absolutely, I actually agree with you, Jim Dale.
Yeah, once. Is that the first time we've ever agreed on anything?
This is the first time ever.
OK, and I'll give you the reason why. Because it doesn't matter which party, by the way, which MP or which subject, it really does not matter. But they do their business in the House of Commons, or if it's a Lord, in the House of Lords. And if you're going to demonstrate, there are places in London which you can demonstrate in and around those areas where you can go. I think it crosses a line. And whether it's legal or not, and I'm not sure. Now, the reason I say that, is the laws of demonstration, they've kind of been mixed up. You don't know where you are with these things, what you're allowed to do.
It's against the Public Order Act, cause alarm or distress.
Can I give an example? All right, so if we go with the fact that it's OK for him to do that, OK, so let's take it that I decide to go outside one of my ex's houses, right, with flags and loud music, waving and chanting and saying stuff, I would be arrested. for harassment. So I don't think there's any difference between me going outside to an ex or somebody who I don't like's house and going, yeah, I'm protesting against something you've done, and these protesters outside his house. That, to me, is harassment.
I agree.
And I don't understand why the police seem unclear about that. No one should be protesting outside anyone's house.
I'd like to see somebody bring the police to account on it and say, do you know the law on this? Because it is against the Public Order Act, or is it that you don't have the facilities to deal with it? I don't know whether this is true, Nana, but I'm a police officer. I've still got colleagues who are in the police and recently left, including from the Met, and I understand that the Met Police only has 137 police detention cells in London.
So this is what this is about.
If that's the case, then, of course, they've got a real logistical / operational problem in dealing with these arrests in a robust way, because they could you've got burglars going on, you've got all sorts of things.
Yeah, but you know what?
Not have
I wouldn't arrest them. I would hit them in their pocket. I'd say, OK, you're outside somebody's house, this is harassment. You've got a fine of about somewhere between £500 to £1,000. I would hit them in their pocket, because a lot of them seem like...
You've then got to get their identity, their addresses,
well,
everything else to find. But if they don't provide it, then you have to arrest them.
Well, that's right.
And then you've got to...
Henry, well, then may I ask you, is it, because you ex-police officer, is it against the law to be actually demonstrating outside somebody's house? Is that actually a physical thing?
No, but what is against the Public Order Act is to cause harassment, alarm or distress. And for that, it's not in itself an arrestable offence, but a police officer in uniform can warn the individual to cease such behaviour that's causing the harassment, alarm or distress, and then if they don't, then can make an arrest. Yeah. And so I would say to you, if you continue that behaviour, then I will have to arrest you.
The line is private-public. If it's private, then it's no. If it's public, then it's yes, because we should all have the right to demonstrate whatever we're demonstrating.
Well, listen,
but then it's peaceful and it's not.
Well, yes, there's that too. But then if you're peaceful or causing alarm or whatever, because what I think is causing alarm, you might not. The bottom line is nobody should be demonstrating outside anybody's house. That's a targeted thing to an individual. And if you've got a group of you, 60 of you, that is absolute harassment. I don't get why the police...
to alarm people.
Well, I don't understand why the police thought that they shouldn't make some arrests. I would have a list of arrests and I'd be fining people and I'd teach them a lesson. Well, listen, on some of the subjects we've been talking about, on James abolishing private schools, James says abolishing private schools is just going to put extreme pressure on state schools. They already have extreme pressure, as proven by the strikes. It's going to ruin schools. Agreed. Yvonne says state schools are full, so to add that is ridiculous and cause more problems. It's disastrous, spiteful and will cause havoc. John says, why did Sir Keir Starmer take any notice of Donald Trump? What he said? Why didn't he just say that he thinks what he thinks about the issue and not talking about Donald Trump? Yeah, you'd think so, but Keir never does that, does he? He always sort of evades actually giving you a position, because otherwise then he'll have to or commit to something. And then Tim says Sir Keir was 100% right to criticise awful Trump. Moreover, Trump might be in jail before the election in America in November. I doubt very much, Tim. Not on trumped-up charges. I'm good, aren't I? Right, listen, stay tuned. Loads more still to come. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. You're watching and listening to The Clash. At 4 o'clock, it's my monologue, but up next...
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 47 minutes after 3 o'clock. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and this is The Clash. Right, so next up, Lord David Cameron. Lord Cameron, it feels a bit...
It doesn't work.
Lord David Cameron has insisted that the Falkland Islands are a valued part of British family. This comes ahead of the Foreign Secretary's visit to the South Atlantic this week. He'll be the first cabinet minister to travel to the islands since 2016. And Argentinian President Javier Milei has called for the islands to be handed over. But David Cameron has said that this is not up for discussion. So should we hand back the Falkland Islands to Argentina? Right, well, I'm still joined by former UKIP leader Henry Bolton and the Primrose League thing. It's not written on there, I'm trying to remember.
President of the Primrose League.
It's the PPL. The PPL. And also...
And just plain me.
And Jim Dale. Plain old Jim Dale is a social or political commentator in a weather vein.
OK, the Falklands. I'm going to declare a personal interest, if I may, because I've been there. I was there in 1982-83, just after the war, walking the battlefields. What a place. Not the Falklands so much. That was great. Sea Island, South Georgia, which belongs in the same regime, if you like. What a place that is as well. So, yeah, I was there. And, look, let's go back in history a little bit, because I think we need a little bit of history. The indigenous people of South America took over the Falklands in the first instance, all them centuries and centuries ago. About the 1800s, Argentina, as such was then, had governorship of the Falklands, and then it was not too long afterwards that Britain then took control. And since then, apart from the skirmish, the battles that went on, it has been Britain. So, look, as far as I'm concerned, it was fought for the right reasons. It was an invasion. I might have thought this might have come up with Milei becoming the Argentinian president, and you know, he's out on a wing somewhere, and this is exactly the kind of thing that happens. No, it's down to the people of the Falklands. If they wish to remain British, if they wish to remain and have their own governorship, then absolutely that's what it should be.
Apparently, the last time they were asked, they did.
Yeah,
so this guy
is
saying that that's what he wants, irrespective of what they want. Henry Bolton.
Yeah, well, they're British. They will remain British, as far as I'm concerned, and until they wish otherwise. I agree with Jim. I don't think we need to make a big song and dance about it. I said earlier in the programme, in regard to something else, that any potential enemy just needs to know, without us sending a specific message, that it will be eye-wateringly and unacceptably painful to take the British forces on. The British forces are there to protect British territory, and you know, my message, it doesn't need to be sent by the Foreign Secretary, but you know, more quietly, look, just don't try it. I think it's not an issue. It's not. We don't need to kowtow to the Argentine president's sort of populistic rhetoric, because that's what it is. I don't think he has any intention of taking them back militarily or in any other way. No, we just leave it to the Falkland Islanders if they said they wanted to be British.
Maybe there's a degree of economics in this, because oil, I'll mention the word, I hate it, but it's there.
You hate oil.
No, I don't want to go into climate and weather today, but I'm just making the point. Yeah, I know. Well, I'll hate it for a different reason. And those islands are pristine. They're absolutely pristine. If you ever get the chance to go down 8,000 miles away and even look at the sky, because you can see all the stars for once. It's not polluted in any shape or form. The seas are crystal clear. The last thing you want there is what's kind of destroying the world at this moment in time in terms of the heat and the pollution that goes on. You do not want oil slicks or an accident down there that will destroy the wildlife in any shape or form. And I was there before Sir David Attenborough.
But why are you bringing that up, though? I'm not quite sure what the relevance
because the relevance of it is it could well be. Henry's just said, what's the reason? It's a populist reason, but sometimes there's an economic reason, and there is oil and gas in those seas in and around that area.
I think there is no doubt that there will be some economic reason why, and a strategic reason why people want those islands.
I think the easy answer is no, Nana.
So,
I mean,
we shouldn't handle
back. No, that's the end of the story. Underlined, exclamation mark.
It's not a problem.
Well, listen, I want to bring you to this email that was sent to me by Robert. Robert, thank you very much. He said, and this is with regard to illegal migration, he said, the bill introduced to Parliament on the 7th of March 2023 will mean that anyone who enters the UK illegally and who passed through the safe country will be legally required to be removed, and the Home Secretary will have the power to enforce this. Is that true?
There are no. Sadly, that's what the bill sort of says, but there are all sorts of caveats to that as well. So there's other legislation that says that they've got all sorts of rights to appeal against that and so on. That's the problem here. That we have, and that you earlier said, Nana, that you believe, and I think you're entirely right, that a whole industry, a legal industry, has grown up around this, and there are still multiple ways that you can appeal against any sort of removal. And that's what we've got to close the loop on. The government, every time they pass a piece of legislation, they leave too many gaps in it, and I just don't understand why that is. I've heard that the Home Office lawyers themselves are insisting that certain holes are placed in there, but I think ministers are overwhelmed by it. The simple answer is that's how it was presented to the public. That's not how it is in reality, sadly.
Yeah, and do you know what?
Briefly, final word.
I'm just saying, I don't know, and do you know what? Probably 90% of the people watching this programme don't know either, and that is the problem. There is no clarity, it's a mess, and that's why we find ourselves in the problem that we're in at this moment in time. One of the reasons.
Well, my thoughts are stop the boats, stop them coming in the first place, but that requires some level of diplomacy. But also, I would say that I would use my army. I would use the army. I'd have the channel patrolled properly.
There are ways of doing this.
And I would have done it properly. A border force.
There are very definite, proven ways of doing this. The government is not listening. The government is choosing to go down the course of Rwanda, which is a red herring.
Listen, it might be... hang on.
I would agree.
Listen, it might be a red herring, but it's the only herring, and right now nobody has any other herrings, so unless somebody can do better, I'd like to see that one work first, because the same things that are scuppering it are the very things that scupper every single attempt to remove illegal migrants. But as you just tuned in, 54 minutes after 3 o'clock, Nana Akua still to come. I've got lots more debate for you, including would the Conservatives be better off with a leader who is more conservative? And don't forget my monologue. That is on the way. We're talking about chest feeding and how apparently a report is saying that chest milk is just as good as breast milk. I don't think so.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Marco Patagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We hold on to unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, all seeing some rain at times, but staying mild for the time being at least. This weather front's pushed outbreaks of rain away from the southeast of England during the course of the afternoon, so we've got a ridge of high pressure building in from the west, quietening things down for the overnight period, but further rain's gathering out towards the west, and that will move in across the far northwest of the UK as we head into the overnight period. Elsewhere though, showers will tend to ease through the evening. We'll see lots of clear weather. It's turning quite misty though, with some fog patches across parts of Wales and the southwest of England during the early hours. Following on from that rain band, we'll see showers turning quite blustery there towards the far northwest by the morning. Quite a mild night, temperatures down to 4 or 5 degrees across rural parts of Scotland, but elsewhere holding up in the high single figures. As for Monday, well, outbreaks of rain continue their journey southeastwards across England and Wales, weakening all the while, so giving some patchy rain across the far southeast into the afternoon. Elsewhere, it's a day of sunshine with a few showers around, those showers quite blustery towards the north and west of Scotland. But once again, it's a mild day for the time of year. Temperatures mostly in double figures, 9 or 10 degrees at best in the north, up to 13 or 14 Celsius down towards the southeast. As for Tuesday, well, further wet and windy weather will move in across the northwest of the UK. Towards the south and east, though, it's a quieter picture, a bit breezy, but plenty of sunshine around and staying quite mild for the time of year. Outbreaks of rain move their way southeastwards later on Tuesday, and it then stays quite unsettled on Wednesday and Thursday, but turning colder towards the north later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I'll say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it, as you know, Eamon. You can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong, to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
You were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Before we get started, let's get your latest news with Ray Addison.
Cheers, Nana. It's 4 o'clock. Our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead that the war must stop now. But Sir Keir says the ceasefire can't be one-sided. He's calling on the Hamas terror group to release all of its remaining hostages. He also said that a two-state solution must be back on the table.
An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts, conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
In the US, President Biden has assured Ukraine that military aid will be delivered. That's despite delays that he blamed on Republicans. The White House says that inaction by the GOP allowed Russia to capture the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday. Comes as some Republicans cast doubt on the US's future support for Ukraine after Donald Trump said that he'd let Russia attack any member that doesn't meet its spending targets. Under NATO guidelines, countries must spend 2% of their GDP to fund the alliance. But speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Republican Senator J.D. Vance said Europe must get used to the idea of the US being less involved in the region.
Look, the best way to help Ukraine, I think, from a European perspective, is for Europe to become more self-sufficient. Vladimir Putin is, of course, in the geopolitical backyard of Europe. The United States, as it focuses more on East Asia, simply can't be expected to foot a disproportionate share of the burden.
Russian authorities have been accused of doing everything they can to avoid handing over Mr. Navalny's body to his family. Yesterday, the 69-year-old mother of Vladimir Putin's most vocal critic visited the remote penal colony where he died. She says she was told his body had been taken to a nearby morgue, but when she arrived, it was closed. Meanwhile, in London, tributes are continuing today at the Russian embassy as people gather outside to lay flowers and messages for Alexei Navalny. His spokespeople claim his death was orchestrated murder by the Russian president. That's been rejected by the Kremlin. Well, 2 people have been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. 34-year-old Lucia Whitaker de Abreu has been charged with failing to remove a face covering. 48-year-old Martin Prady is accused of obstructing a police constable. It comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. 2 ministers have written to police chiefs to express concerns over the safety of politicians amid increased protests. Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and Policing Minister Chris Philp took the unusual step after pro-Palestinian activists gathered outside the home of Tory MP Tobias Ellwood. It comes as reports in the Daily Mail suggest that Just Stop Oil activists are planning to occupy the homes of MPs, with one protester reportedly telling a journalist that the group is ready to, quote, look a bit loony. The King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church in Sandringham this morning. Braving the wet weather, His Majesty and the Queen clutched umbrellas in their first public outing since Prince Harry's interview on US breakfast television. The Duke of Sussex is said to be willing to undertake some royal duties while his father undergoes treatment for cancer, though there's reportedly been no changes to current arrangements. And Britain's brightest stars are putting on their Sunday best ahead of the BAFTAs tonight. The nuclear bomb epic Oppenheimer is leading the pack with 13 nominations, including Best Film. Elsewhere, The Crown star Claire Foy is up for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the heartfelt drama All of Us Strangers. Her co-star Paul Mescal is also up for a gong. though the film's lead, Andrew Scott, was notably snubbed. Sophie Ellis-Bextor will perform her 2001 hit Murder on the Dance Floor after it re-entered the charts thanks to a much-talked-about scene in the film Saltburn, which is also up for 5 awards. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Here we go again. Another attempt to marginalise women in what can only be described, in my view, as an absurd assessment. According to an NHS trust, breast milk, or chest milk really, produced by trans women, so basically men, is as good for babies as that produced by a mother who's given birth. What? A leaked letter from the medical director of University of Sussex NHS Trust, in order not to discriminate, described both of them as human milk. Now, the Trust said that the milk produced by trans women after taking a combination of drugs is comparable, I presume in a good way, to that produced following the birth of a baby. Don't make me laugh. On what planet can that possibly be true? Let's ignore, if you will, the fact that a trans woman is a biological man, and let's just focus on the numerous drugs taken by this person, A, to stabilise their condition, and B, to enable the level of production of milk required. So let's look at point B. So to enable the creation of milk, a combination of drugs is given to a man to firstly grow the breast tissue capable of lactation, which include testosterone suppressants and oestrogen and progesterone. Then domperidone, or metoclopramide, are given to stimulate lactation. In low doses, these drugs are used to avert nausea, but in high doses, they can bring on lactation, and at such levels, one of them can also cause heart arrhythmias. What's going on here? Even if this person were a biological woman, any medication taken when pregnant is scrutinised heavily to ensure that it doesn't cross the placenta, and when breastfeeding, the traces of it don't end up in the milk itself. So why on earth take such a risk when there is little or no information on the long-term effect of this to the recipient, a newborn baby? And there is no real need to do this anyway. Is it even safe? The NHS Trust point to a 5-month scientific study in 2022 which measured testosterone levels on chest milk, which found no observable side effects. But the study didn't really go far enough to evaluate the long-term effect or assess what was actually in the milk. And as this is a relatively new phenomenon, little else is known. Why is this even necessary? The answer is, it isn't. There are plenty of safe and tested alternatives available. Instead, this is about satisfying someone's fantasy of breastfeeding, and certainly, in my view, isn't in the interest of the child. Rosie Duffield said, "Babies cannot be used as guinea pigs for someone else's lifestyle choice. When a man has not and cannot grow a baby, why are we pandering to this? Who does it benefit? Not the children. We wouldn't do any other medical experiments on babies. Breast milk, made by a baby's biological mother, is tailor-made for that baby." Exactly. Millie Hill, author of the Positive Birth book, went further. She said, "Breastfeeding is not about the experience of the person doing the feeding. It is about nourishing and nurturing a baby." She went on to say, "No newborn should be used as a prop to affirm an adult's identity as female." But then University Hospital Sussex Trust is a member of Stonewall's Diversity Champions programme. And they admitted that the policy was taken from external organisations. In a statement, the Trust said, "The Trust takes the well-being and safeguarding of children very seriously." Well, if that's true, why are you prepared, in the words of Rosie Duffield, to use newborn babies as guinea pigs? So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would the Conservatives be better off with a leader who is, well, conservative? Who could replace Rishi Sunak to stop this terminal decline in their election fortunes? Afterwards, we'll open that up to the Great British Voice, who today is coming from Kidderminster. Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. We'll be crossing live to Los Angeles to speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, on all what's going on in the States. Then at 5, it's this week's Outside. My mystery guest is an award-winning chef with restaurants across London. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Who do you think it is? You can guess now, but not many clues. But that's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Right, I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
Wow.
Wow.
What a treat.
Chest feeding.
Joe, I was sent this article this morning, and at first I wondered whether it was a scientific breakthrough. And I thought this is... I was looking at it... I did. I was looking at
an April Fool.
I was looking at it objectively, thinking, OK, so this is a scientific breakthrough. A bloke can basically lactate and produce milk. And then I thought, well, hang on. This is unnatural. It's almost turning into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Almost. Science is almost turning into a movie. And the fact that they are giving people medical supplements. And the word there that was so pertinent was necessary. This is not necessary. There are plenty of off-the-shelf formulas that people can purchase. And the World Health Organization will quite understandably say breast is best. I get all of that. But we're talking about someone who is born a man. And, for all intents and purposes, is a man. Now, yes, they can go through whatever gender reassignment. I get all of that and I respect them. That's their journey. But it is not necessary. And when you actually look at the chemicals that they are feeding into themselves, throwing down their gullet in order to lactate, and the possible... Why are you making me smile?
Throwing down their gullet?
You really do.
Oh,
you really do. But this is the in a nutshell. And... You know, it's not necessary.
It just isn't, is it?
That's the thing. If it was necessary, it's a scientific breakthrough. Well, but I could go to Marks and Spencer's and buy some baby formula. I'm a bloke. I don't need to lactate.
The thing is, it is a natural thing. So men can lactate, and sometimes they... But in very small quantities, and they don't have the breast tissue to do it like a woman. So they need to take all these chemicals and hormones to make that happen. Some women sometimes take some chemicals to encourage the lactation. But this is on top of someone who, if they're identifying as trans, may well be taking other drugs to stabilise that condition as well. Christine?
The whole thing is just horrifying from start to finish, and it's just more wokery. It's not necessary. Yes, breast milk is best for babies. We all know that. But plenty of babies grow up without being able to be breastfed for one reason or another. The women die in childbirth, for God's sake. There are plenty of babies who do not have the advantage, if it is an advantage, of breastfeeding. We just don't need this. It is... Why? What is the point? What is this health authority seeking to do? They're just seeking to push wokeism in our faces. They really are. It's so unnecessary. It's so unnatural. And exactly, it is so new that we have no idea what might happen down the line for babies who are chest-fed.
I think it's, you know, and what they were trying to do is classify both of them as human milk, because they are, but not differentiate. So
it is just...
You could end up with, you know...
We're going down such a dangerous and ghastly path. I mean, goodness knows where all this is going to end if normal, sensible people don't stand up and say enough.
But there are plenty of drugs that have been produced for one illness or one condition that have found to have different side effects. For example, bald men around the world will have taken these tablets that were, I think, designed for heart.
Really?
How do you know about that, Danny?
How do we...
When I was losing my hair 25 years ago...
The case study.
When I wasn't a case study.
He's asking for a friend.
No, but there were loads of these drugs, loads of these tablets that you could take that were... Viagra, for example, was designed for heart... for high blood pressure.
It was, yes.
OK, so men with high blood pressure were taking Viagra, and at night time they understood it had a rather interesting effect on their libido, for example. So that's an established drug.
So now it's the baldest...
A bald, impotent guy.
He's happened to come up...
Yes, but that's...
So I'm being fair to the pharmaceutical companies. Even though they've said it's not necessary, so we'd rather you didn't. Lots and lots of drugs that are established, off the shelf, prescribed by your doctor, were once designed for something else.
Yes, but Viagra...
My point is that we shouldn't necessarily dismiss it out of hand. Because although it's not designed for this...
I'm talking about the fact that there is no long-term study that says that the effect of this so-called chest milk on a newborn, so later on in life, whether that might have some adverse adverse effect that we don't know about. So why take the risk on it?
Well, it's not necessary, you shouldn't.
It's not necessary.
I mean, Viagra enables men to do what they are biologically supposed to be able to do anyway. So it helps men when, you know, it isn't making them, enabling them to do something which they were not born to do, which is what this business of trans men producing chest milk, they were not born to produce chest milk, and it's obscene.
Well, men can produce milk, but, you know, and a man can do that, but not at the large quantities required to sustain a child. So this is enabling it to happen more, and it's also...
This is a vanity project.
It's a vanity
thing. Of course it is.
Essential. So
it's not essential.
It's woken. It's not vanity, it's wokeism. Well, you will put up with this and accept this.
In my view, there's a level of fetishism towards it.
Really?
Well, I think so as well, because, you know, why would you need to do that if you know that you can get milk in other forms and there's an element of risk to it, to the newborn baby? Why would you do that? I, as a mother, would never do that. If there was an alternative that had literally no risk, so... You know, I don't think there's any associated risk with milk that is given to a baby from, you know...
Lots of babies have to survive on formula milk because for one reason or another. Exactly.
So and that's got a long-term historical analysis, so we know already that this is relatively safe for babies. But this...
is ludicrous. What's a man going to do?
Finishing that.
Sorry. The whole thing makes me so angry. What is a man going to do if he's got triplets?
From their perspective, from a trans woman's perspective, so a bloke who now identifies... What that does is fulfil his... I can't really call them her, I'm so sorry. That's fulfilling his lifetime ambition to be a...
Whatever it is.
Is it a fantasy, though? Is it a fantasy?
It's not... like something in your mind, you want to imagine yourself breastfeeding and this and that. Who's benefiting? Who's benefiting? It's not the baby on this occasion, and that's my worry.
It's not something the Health Trust should be promoting, in my view. If some man wants to do it, that's up to him.
But it's the baby. Are we concerned about the baby? We don't know the results and the effects of this, or the chemicals that are within that chest. But anyway, what do you think? GBViews@GBNews.com or tweet me at GBNews. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, Worldview. We'll cross live to Los Angeles to speak to the host of the Politics People podcast. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would the more conservative leader be able to save the Tory party? Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me at GBNews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. It's 21 minutes, fast approaching after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, could a more Conservative leader save the Tories? Morley and Outwood MP Andrew Jenkins has called for Rishi Sunak to be replaced with a real Conservative Party leader. She was talking to me yesterday. Let's see what she had to say. So who do you think, then?
Who do I think? I mean, I'm happy with Priti, Suella. I mean, I'd bring back Boris, to be honest with you.
Really?
He's still... yeah, I mean, I'd want him to clearly ditch the net zero stuff, but when I'm campaigning, he's still so positively strong response on the doorstep.
Well, this comes as many angry Tory members inundated the Bring Back Boris campaign with messages of support following the Wellingborough and Kingswood by-election defeats. Reform UK Honorary President GB News presenter Nigel Farage has even said that he believes Conservative members would choose him to be the next leader. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Could a more Conservative leader, they'd probably choose me, could a more Conservative leader save the Tories? Well, joining me to debate this is political commentator Russell Quirk, social commentator Jim Dale, Conservative peer Lord Moylan, and former leader of UKIP Henry Bolton. That's the wrong box, it should be a star box. I'm the biggest box. Right, I'm going to start with you. Lord Moylan, because I was reading what you said in the Daily Telegraph, if you could elaborate on what you said.
Well, there's a poll out today which indicates, as so many polls do, that you could conceivably see a path to victory if you had a new leader of the party and new, more Conservative policies. And all I was saying in the Telegraph today is that I don't think that, at this stage, that is a realistic way forward. Unless Rishi Sunak decided voluntarily to give up being Prime Minister, the mechanism for a change of leadership is just too lengthy and too elaborate. And it's still also the case that there's a large number of MPs, or I'll put it another way, there's no real agreement within the Conservative Party in the House of Commons on a new set of policies. So you can't just switch to a whole new set of policies if many of your MPs don't want to move in that direction. So that second leg is pretty unrealistic as well. So I was saying, really, probably the best way of addressing this now is to bring the election forward.
Really?
Because I don't see it getting any better.
Really? It's interesting because Dame Andrew Jenkins suggested that actually we could have a leadership contest. I said, put the 6 weeks in between. She said it's not that long. We could do that quickly and get a new leader if there's any hope. So just say they went along that track, a new leader. Let's give an example of Suella Braverman. Very briefly, Lord Morland, do you think that could help their fortunes?
Yeah, well, I think one of the other problems is, I mean, I think Suella would be a very fine leader of the party, but and there are others as well. But I think one of the problems is that we've got this additional difficulty that a lot of the electorate have just stopped listening to the Conservative Party. And they're not really persuaded, you know, oh, you've gotten some new policies, you know, pull the other one. They're not really that interested in a new leader. I think people, you know, have stopped listening in a way. That's one of the problems.
Russell Quirk, what do you think?
Yeah, hi, Nana. Look, we are potentially 10 months away from a general election, so the election needs to be called by January 2025. And look, we used to say that a week is a long time in politics, let alone 10 months. And frankly, the Conservative Party have absolutely nothing to lose but to replace Rishi Sunak. And frankly, you know, given the results on Thursday in 2 by-elections, with another one just around the corner, a lot of leaders have been replaced for, far less indiscretion politically than Rishi Sunak brought us to on Thursday. I do think that given the latest poll that I saw said that something like 25% of people that voted Conservative in 2019 will vote Conservative again at the next election. In other words, 75% of Conservative voters that voted in 2019 will not vote Conservative. The Conservative Party have nothing to lose. I'm personally, because I really fear a Labour government, a Keir Starmer administration, because look, we all know, those of us in the centre and on the centre right, how that's going to end up in 3 to 4 years' time. To save us from that fate and for an even worse economy, even worse position when it comes to not protecting our borders, crime, identity politics, high taxation and so on. I think rather than going into an election, certainly now, and us as a party facing Armageddon, and then hoping for the best over the next 5 years, where then it all gets back to normal and there's a kind of cleansing with a new leader. We do still have time. And actually, I agree with the Suella Braverman point. Really? But also, let's not forget Lord David Frost. Lord David Frost, I think, is the man that should be Prime Minister of this country, with Boris Johnson as
well, what about... But that's great, but what about the people whilst they're doing this 6-month election? Jim Dale.
Yeah, the question is, will the Tories do better with a more Conservative leader? If that means going further to the right, they'll be through this wall and in the canal, to be frank with you. Because basically, as far as general elections are concerned, anybody who's on the fringe of politics, and I would include extreme right as being on the fringe, or the extreme left as being on the fringe, you don't get elected. It's as simple as that. So if they're going to shift from Sunak, who's pretty far right anyway, and go even further right, then that's just going to send them even further into oblivion. Look, let's face it, let's be very, very simple about it. Sunak is sunk. With or without him, the Tories are sunk. Simple.
Yeah, it's true. If you take the A out of there, then he is. Yeah, he is actually sunk.
You noticed, yeah.
Henry Bolton.
Yeah, I agree with Lord Moynihan in terms of the practicalities, the logistics of changing leader. The time is very, very short. But I think at the same time, if you are heading towards an iceberg at full steam ahead and the captain refuses to change course, then what do? You just sort of prepare the lifeboats, or you try to move the captain aside and change course? I would do the latter. Well, I'd probably do both, actually. But I think there is time. But then we've also got to have a leader who can unite the Conservative Party, if it's going to work. A leader who is going to have a plan ready to go on day one, and not just simply be able to tell the electorate, look, these are the new policies, or this is the new plan, but actually demonstrate within days a determined engagement on implementing that plan. Then it's possible. But at the moment, I think the Conservatives are on course to an absolute decimation, and we'll end up with a Labour government, which I fear.
Well, a lot of people are fearing that. I mean, Lord Moylan, do you think that they're... I mean, you suggested a different leader. Do you think there's any modicum of hope for the Tory party? Is there anything they can do?
Well, there's always...
Because we're suggesting
I
being
didn't
more
suggest changing leader. That's the difference. I'm not actually suggesting changing leader because I don't actually think there's time to do it, implement it, and do it in a way that's credible to the voters. That's the real difficulty we face. But what I am... I do think there is always hope. Of course, hope should never be abandoned. And it is possible that things will get better on the economic front, that the boats will stop, that inflation, cost of living will come down, and so on. But I don't see the signs, really, of that happening in a way that is going to carry enough people with us to make a huge difference. But it's possible that we could have a better outcome a few months down the road than we would if we were going today. But then it's also possible things are going to get worse, and people are rolling off fixed-rate mortgages, for example, and seeing their mortgage payments go up. There'll be more people doing that. That will add to the cost of living crisis. And we don't know what's going to happen with boats because we're not in charge, and if the summer weather is placid and the seas are flat, who knows how many might come across. We're not in charge of that.
Well, what I was reading here is a Tory peer, Lord Moylan, this is in the Telegraph, said the party had a possible path to victory if it got rid of Mr Sunak.
I was quoting the poll there. That got slightly mangled by the but I think that's what the poll today shows.
But then I went on to say that if that is the path to victory, there are considerable difficulties involved with both parts of it.
Jim Dale.
Yeah, when you look at things that work and don't work, you sometimes look at the brand. The Conservative brand is destroyed. That is the problem. It's been destroyed from within in terms of what they've done and what they've not done. And when you have a brand that's not just tarnished but in wrecks, you ain't gonna come back at that. That's why the polls have more or less stayed as they have. That's why you're seeing the by-elections results that you've seen this week. And there's no rescue party. Reform are not going to be the next government in any shape or form. They'll come probably fourth and not even third. So there's only one way, one direction, and that is bring on a general election, and you will see a change of government.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to ask you all finally then. So, will a potential change? I think we know the answer. Could a more Conservative leader save the Tories? Russell Quirk, yes or no?
Yes, can I just quickly correct Jim, though? Jim saying that Rishi Sunak is far right is absolutely unbelievable. Not only is it insulting, it's just simply not true.
I don't think he said...
No, I didn't.
What did you say?
I didn't. I said
this
to the
Conservative
right.
Party, the problem with the Conservative Party is that it has gone too left. It actually needs to fulfil the manifesto pledges of 2019. Then it might get...
So, very briefly then, so a more Conservative leader, could a more Conservative leader save the Tories, yes or no? Russell?
Yes.
Yes. Jim Dale, yes or no?
Not a chance.
Lord Moylan, yes or no?
Possibly if it could be done by magic, where you just pull a curtain and you have a new... and all of a sudden you have a new
same answer.
With new policies. If that were possible, then it might be a path to victory.
Henry Bolton, yes or no?
Yes, if it can be done, and yes, if the policies are ready to go with agreement across the party, which I don't think will happen.
Well, but that's a yes you're saying, right? Well, thank you so much for your thoughts, Russell Quirk, social commentator, Jim Dale, Conservative peer, Lord Moylan, and also leader of UKIP, or former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton, and also the Primrose League president, something like that. Well, listen, if you just tuned in, welcome aboard. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio at 5 o'clock. It's my outside guest now. Remember this, he's a chef with restaurants across London. He also once held a special world record for the most number of times a pancake is flipped in 1 minute. Any guesses? But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking whether you think that the Tory party could be saved with more Conservative policies. You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and also Christine Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news with Ray.
Nana, thanks. 4:31, our top story. Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead the war must stop now. He also said that a two-state solution must be back on the table.
An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts, conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
Well, in the US, President Biden has assured Ukraine that military aid will be delivered. That's despite delays, and which he's blamed on Republicans. The White House says inaction by the GOP allowed Russia to capture the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday. Comes as some Republicans cast doubt on the US's future support for Ukraine. Republican Senator J.D. Vance says Europe must get used to the US being less involved in the region. 2 people have been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. One is accused of failing to remove a face covering and the other obstructing a constable. Comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. And the King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church in Sandringham this morning. Braving the wet weather, His Majesty and the Queen clutched umbrellas in their first public outing since Prince Harry's interview on US breakfast television. The Duke of Sussex is said to be willing to undertake some royal duties while his father undergoes treatment for cancer, though there's reportedly been no changes to the current arrangements. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Nana is back in just a moment.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the PM, the Tory PM, can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
It's interesting they can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome back if you've just tuned in. Where have you been? It's time now for our Great British Debate. Before that we do that, I've got a couple of messages from people with regard to the monologue on breast milk. Penny said, "Stop the planet, I want to get off. The world is going mad. Everyone needs a checkup from the neck up." Very good. And Gary says, "Where is the newborn baby coming from when the biological man turned woman cannot produce a baby in the first place?" Well, that's all good question. Keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. But let's continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, could a more Conservative leader save the Tories? Morley and Outwood MP Andrew Jenkins has said that it's time for Rishi Sunak to go and be replaced by a real Conservative leader. And this comes after the increased support of the Bring Back Boris campaign following the Tories' devastating Wellingborough and Kingswood by-election defeats. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, could a more Conservative leader save the Tories? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me now, Christine Hamilton, author and broadcaster, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, Christine Hamilton, I'm going to start with you.
No. No, there isn't time. It's ridiculous. What the Tory party needs to do is change the substance, not the style of leadership or anything like that. I know I mean, the whole rot started when there's only about 50 real Conservatives amongst the members of Parliament. And the rot started with David Cameron when he got in and he got control of the selection of candidates. And instead of constituencies being allowed to select a candidate in their own mould, which is much further to the right, they had to have people foisted on them by central office. So we've got all these people who are supposedly Tory MPs. They're not, as you can see by the way they behave. So it's far too late, and you know, all the metaphors are there, the icebergs and deck chairs and goodness knows what. It's far too late. There is nothing they can do. And what the Tory party needs to do...
hitting an iceberg.
They need... Can I just finish? They need a catastrophic defeat, which is what they're going to get, to throw some sense into them, and they may be back in 5 years. I doubt it. It'll probably be 10 years.
All maritime metaphors, aren't they? Sinking ships and Titanic and iceberg.
Rats and wheels.
OK, the question...
The wheels one.
What was the wheel one?
Sleep at the wheel, all that sort of stuff.
That's a motoring one, really.
No, it's not.
It is more than a...
No, it's...
Oh, no, I bet you it's a shit one. Of course, the wheel.
The wheel.
That's right. OK.
Ships came before cars.
That's correct. Can a more conservative leader save the Tories? The answer is no, because the Reform Party are determined on ultimate ruination. The reform, but Freudian. Oh, there's my lipstick rolling along the table. The Reform Party are going to scupper them. Another maritime metaphor. They're going to scupper the good ship Tories, aren't they?
Well, hang on. What kind of party...
Boris Johnson could.
What kind of party are you if you rely on other people to fail? Well, I suppose you're the Labour Party. No, I've thought about it.
What sort of party are you if you need someone to fail?
But the point is, reform...
I can answer this.
Well, no, but the Tories saying, oh, well, if people vote instead of... You're ruining our votes by voting for reform. What kind of...
OK, reform are the long term. They're playing a long game.
Yeah.
So reform may not get into power for another 2, 3, 4... That's if they do. I'm just hypothesising for 3, 4 more general elections. And they want a proper Conservative government.
But I'm talking about the Conservative Party. But what kind of party are you if you're saying, don't vote for reform, vote for reform, vote for the Labour Party?
Because you've never had an alternative to the Conservative Party. Yeah, and now there is a viable Conservative alternative.
You're assuming that reform only took votes from the Tories.
Exactly.
And what the Tories have to do, the people who matter to the Tories are the people...
That's a good point.
Well, the people who matter are the people who voted Tory in 2019. And if they can't hang on to those... At the by-election, most of them sat on their hands and stayed at home. That's big trouble.
And also,
apathy.
By-elections never really ring true with general elections either,
tiny turnout.
I know Conservative voters who are voting reform. I don't know Labour voters who are voting reform. Maybe that's just my own personal anecdotal experience. No. But you're right, lots of Labour people will be voting reform, particularly in the North red walls, blue walls, red walls, whatever colour.
I think also in the by-elections, the people who are brilliant at tactical voting are the Lib Dems, and they want, above all else, to get the Tories out. So in those by-elections, I reckon quite a lot of Lib Dems, etc., will have voted for the person who would get out the Tories.
Tactical voting?
Would be Labour. Yes, would be Labour. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Ed Davey, for starters, because he's gone AWOL. I mean, where is he? After this post office thing, when before that, he'd asked people to resign about 34 times. Now he's involved and embroiled in something, and he's still clinging on, and no one can find him.
The problem with tactical voting, in my opinion, is that you feel isolated, and you think, well, what if I'm the only one who votes tactically? I tell you what, sod this, I'm going to vote Lib Dem, or I'm going to vote whoever.
But what the Lib Dems, my guess is that a lot of the Lib Dems will have looked at the by-elections and thought, right, to defeat the Tories, we need to vote Labour.
No, I understand that, but in isolation, you may go and your fingers and hand may be quivering over the boxes, and you think, oh, am I the only one who's going to vote tactically? Am I wasting my vote?
Well, nobody knows.
Exactly. It's the uncertainty.
Just apologies if anyone was offended by that.
By Lib Dems? Oh, there's loads of them out there.
What's he said that's to be
repeat it.
There's loads of...
What did you say?
Well, I can't repeat it. I think I know... I think...
apologies you're offended by that.
Well, I wasn't offended. No, didn't hear it.
Well, look, the day I offend you is the day this place gets shut down. If I say it on air.
Yeah. So what do you think, then? A more conservative...
Boris Johnson, potentially.
Well, that's what Dame Andrew Jenkins said. She said, about Boris, and I actually said, I remember I did a monologue, I said, it's the most stupid move that the Tories have ever done. To get rid of Boris was stupid, and now look where they are.
Yeah, but bringing Boris back is no solution to the problem. But Boris is culpable of all these things. I mean, Boris was in, lockdown, net zero, higher taxes...
Not even an MP.
Well, not now. They've taken everything off.
But Boris was in favour of all the things that have caused the problems in the first place.
All I'm saying is that she suggested that we should bring him back, but he should drop the net zero stuff, which I would agree. But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go? Oh, there's no map. Where's my map? We'll go straight to you, John, reading Kidderminster. My map's gone. What do you think? A more Conservative leader save the Tories?
Nana, thank you so much. Christine, I'm 101% with Christine here. I don't think there's anything that can save the Tories now, because I think they've made a complete mess of it. In a nutshell, I believe generally needs to trust the government and the politicians. And how anybody could trust any of these Tories now is beyond me, because they make so many things they say they're going to do, and then nothing happens. And I suppose I'm representative, or an example of, should we say, a pensioner. I'm 75 years of age. I'm living on a pension plus a little bit of part-time work. I'm not a rich man. I'm just, I think, Joe Public. And I don't trust them. I wouldn't trust them any further than they could throw them. And as for Boris coming back, well, forget that. He was the beginning of the end for me. So, Christine, I'm with you.
Great, thank you, John.
John Reedy, thank you so much. Always a pleasure there. He's a great British voice. We'll get the maps back for you next week. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up in the next hour for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, was Sir Keir Starmer right to take a swipe at Trump for his NATO comments? But next, it's time for Worldview. We'll get the latest on what's going on in the US.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So, so when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget, you can also stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for World View. Donald Trump has dipped his toes into the fashion business. The former US president announced his line of Trump-branded shoes at SneakerCon this week. A pair of his shoes will set you back $399, and this cash will come in handy for Mr Trump, who has been ordered by a judge to pay nearly $355 million to New York State for apparently lying about the value of his properties. Travelling over now to America, let's speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, and find out the latest. Paul Dudridge, welcome on board. Trump loses his third New York civil case in 9 months. Yeah.
Yep. He's $500 million in the hole now to New York. Now, look, he says he's going to appeal all these cases. So 2 of these cases were the E. Jean Carroll. OK, these are civil cases, by the way. He's not been found guilty of any crimes. 2 of the cases, E. Jean Carroll, that's about $100 million. And then this one, $350 million. You can't do business in New York for 3 years either. Absolute lawfare going on. This is prosecuted by the New York Attorney General, who campaigned. Her campaign slogan was she's going to get Trump. Before she even got into office, she knew. So the thing is, he was at SneakerCon, as you say. He literally has to either liquidate companies, borrow the money to pay. See, he's going to appeal, all right? He's going to appeal. The trick is he has to still put the money into court whilst these appeals are being heard. So ironically, he's $500 million in the hole. He has to actually put about another $100 million into court. It's like 20 to 25% more while the appeals are being heard. So he has to get a bond broker, basically, to and that's going to cost him 20%. So he has to come up with like $100 million just to tread water at this point. It is an absolute abuse. It's an abuse of the system, the most pernicious lawfare that the US has ever witnessed. And even if he wins, which he will, he'll ultimately win these on appeal. It ties his hands. This is something you talked about weeks ago. It ties his hands financially. It ties his businesses. He can't do business for 3 years. It ties his hands financially. He can't even make money because his wealth is going to be tied up until these appeals are heard.
So he's got his new. So he's got his new SpeakerCon, sort of a SneakerCon thing where he's selling trainers. Is this true? That can't be true. He's seriously selling trainers at $399 to probably try and make some money.
Well, listen, if you can get a pair, I've got a garage full of them. It's, I think they're called the No Surrender. I think they're called the No Surrender sneakers, gold high tops. And, well, if the thing is, these are going to sell, but they're only going to sell a few million. He literally does have to have like at least $100 million cash. Who's going to lend him money to actually appeal these cases? He's in a very, very financial sticky situation.
I want a pair. If he does win, though, can he then sort of quash all this, or does he still have to pay it?
He can quash it. He will quash it. Yes, that will exactly what will happen ultimately. In the meantime, you have to come up with the cash and put it into the court. That's the trick. And this is how, look, never go against City Hall. It's always going to win. This political class has got it in for him. Literally, I mean, this is the campaign Letitia James ran on, was basically, we've got it in for Donald Trump. Yeah. He's going to win, but in the meantime, you cannot get hold of your own money. It is going to be held in escrow for years.
I want to ask you, because Keir Starmer made some comments with regard to Trump and kind of slightly insulted Trump with Trump's comment about 2% of GDP, and that he sort of said to Putin, come on, attack those countries that aren't paying. Has Trump commented on Keir Starmer making an almost sort of comment about him, or has he even noticed?
No, well, I think what we know is that the leader of the opposition to Donald Trump is less important than a pair of gold high-top sneakers. So he hasn't yet found time to comment on Keir Starmer's retort, asking NATO signatories to actually stick to their agreement to pay to the 2%. So no, he hasn't found time in his busy schedule yet to reply to Keir Starmer. But gosh, can you imagine if Keir Starmer's prime minister and Trump is president? It's just going to be the best. I mean, that's worth the price of admission alone. Yeah.
And very briefly, Hillary Clinton and Obama. What's going on there? Got about a minute.
Okay. So Trump's got a criminal case coming up on March 25th. Okay, the famous whatever her name is, porn star hush money
Stormy
case.
Daniels.
That's going to be the first. Stormy Daniels going to be the first criminal case. Okay, now. Hillary Clinton, Obama, both fined for spending campaign funds exactly the same way. They were treated as misdemeanors and just given a fine, 350,000, 100,000. Trump is absolutely being treated as a felony, and it's a criminal case.
Yeah.
He is being accused of exactly the same thing in this March 25th case. And the point is, the reason it's relevant this week is that the date was confirmed. It's March 25th. The President of the United States is going to be the very first time a president has been tried in a criminal case. I can't say ex-president, I'm sorry.
Now, well, you know, he's making moves and shapes, and we're getting more action from him than Joe Biden. Paul Dudridge, thank you so much. That's Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast. I'm Nana Akua. This is a GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, my next great British debate. Is Starmer right to attack Donald Trump over his NATO comments? And stay tuned for Outside. My guest is a chef with restaurants across London. He held the world record for the most pancake flips. And he's one of his siblings. He's one of 9. All of that after this.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Marco Petagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We hold on to unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, all seeing some rain at times, but staying mild for the time being at least. These weather fronts pushed outbreaks of rain away from the southeast of England during the course of the afternoon, so we've got a ridge of high pressure building in from the west, quietening things down for the overnight period, but further rains gathering out towards the west, and that will move in across the far northwest of the UK as we head into the overnight period. Elsewhere though, showers will tend to ease through the evening. We'll see lots of clear weather, turning quite misty though, with some fog patches across parts of Wales and the southwest of England during the early hours. Following on from that rain band, we'll see showers turning quite blustery there towards the far northwest by the morning. Quite a mild night, temperatures down to 4 or 5 degrees across rural parts of Scotland, but elsewhere holding up in the high single figures. As for Monday, well, outbreaks of rain continue their journey southeastwards across England and Wales, weakening all the while, so giving some patchy rain across the far southeast into the afternoon. Elsewhere, it's a day of sunshine with a few showers around, those showers quite blustery towards the north and west of Scotland. But once again, it's a mild day for the time of year. Temperatures mostly in double figures, 9 or 10 degrees at best in the north, up to 13 or 14 Celsius down towards the southeast. As for Tuesday, well, further wet and windy weather will move in across the northwest of the UK. Towards the south and east, though, it's a quieter picture, a bit breezy, but plenty of sunshine around and staying quite mild for the time of year. Outbreaks of rain move their way southeastwards later on Tuesday, and it then stays quite unsettled on Wednesday and Thursday, but turning colder towards the north later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
"2024, a battleground year."
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's fast approaching 5 o'clock. I'm so excited, my outside guest. I can't wait. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, I'll be joined by a very special mystery guest who says that George Michael helped him cook up a storm in the kitchen. That's why I'm excited, because he's brought food. I love that. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, was Sir Keir Starmer right to take a swipe at Donald Trump? But first, let's get your latest news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nana. Good afternoon. Coming up to 1 minute past 5, and we start with some breaking news. Well, a 42-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the deaths of 3 children in Bristol. It's after officers attended a concern for welfare call in Blaze Walk in Seamills this afternoon. The suspect is currently in police custody at a hospital. Now, this is a developing story, and we'll bring you more as we get it. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead the war must stop now. But he says the ceasefire can't be one-sided, calling on Hamas to release all of its remaining hostages. He also said a two-state solution must be back on the table.
An end to the fighting, not just now, not just for a pause, but permanently. A ceasefire that lasts, conference, that is what must happen now. The fighting must stop now.
Well, in the US, President Biden has assured Ukraine that military aid will be delivered. That's despite delays he's blaming on Republicans. The White House says inaction by the GOP allowed Russia to capture the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday. Comes as some Republicans cast doubt on the US's future support for Ukraine. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Republican Senator J.D. Vance said Europe must get used to the idea of the US being less involved in the region.
Look, the best way to help Ukraine, I think, from a European perspective, is for Europe to become more self-sufficient. Vladimir Putin is, of course, in the geopolitical backyard of Europe. The United States, as it focuses more on East Asia, simply can't be expected to foot a disproportionate share of the burden.
Russian authorities have been accused of doing everything they can to avoid handing over Alexei Navalny's body to his family. Yesterday, the 69-year-old mother of President Putin's most vocal critic visited the remote penal colony where he died. She says she was told his body had been taken to a nearby morgue, but when she arrived, it was closed. Meanwhile, in London, tributes are continuing today outside the Russian embassy as people lay flowers and messages. Navalny's spokespeople claim his death was orchestrated murder by Putin, and that's been rejected by the Kremlin. 2 people have been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. One, 34-year-old Lucia Whitaker de Abreu, has been charged with failing to remove a face covering. The other, 48-year-old Martin Prady, is accused of obstructing a police constable. It comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. Two ministers have written to police chiefs to express concerns over the safety of politicians amid increased protests. Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and Policing Minister Chris Philp took the unusual step after pro-Palestinian activists gathered outside the home of Tory MP Tobias Ellwood. It comes as reports in the Daily Mail suggest that Just Stop Oil activists are planning to occupy the homes of MPs, with one protester reportedly telling a journalist that the group is ready to, quote, look a bit loony. The King was seen smiling and waving as he attended church in Sandringham this morning, braving the wet weather. His Majesty and the Queen clutched umbrellas in their first public outing since Prince Harry's interview on US breakfast television. The Duke of Sussex is said to be willing to undertake some royal duties while his father undergoes treatment for cancer, though there's reportedly been no changes to the current arrangements. And finally, Britain's brightest stars are putting on their Sunday best ahead of the BAFTAs this evening. The nuclear bomb epic Oppenheimer is leading the pack with 13 nominations, including Best Film. Elsewhere, Claire Foy is up for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the heartfelt drama All of Us Strangers. Her co-star Paul Mescal is also up for a gong, though the film's lead, Andrew Scott, was notably snubbed. Sophie Ellis-Bextor will perform her 2001 hit Murder on the Dance Floor after it re-entered the charts, thanks to a scene in the film Saltburn, which is also up for 5 awards. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, also author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Still to come each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, my mystery guest is someone who knows spaghetti from his linguine. You could say he's married to the hob. Stay tuned to find out. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Starmer wise to attack Trump on his NATO remarks? Now, this is the man who could be the President of the United States next year, meaning Starmer, if he's elected as Prime Minister, will have to deal with him. So what's he playing at, for goodness sake? And as ever, you can get in touch at gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. So it's just gone 7 minutes after 5 o'clock, and each Sunday around about this time I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And this week, my outside guest is, without a doubt, a big cheese. After his Italian country childhood, he's settled in Britain, where he became a master chef and has restaurants across London. He once held the world record for the most number of pancakes flipped inside 1 minute. And he comes from a very big family, one of 9 siblings, in fact, and he's cooked for Madonna, Prince Edward, and even thanked George Michael for helping him put food on the table. But his skills are not reserved in the kitchen. He definitely has the X factor, having wowed audiences with his singing talents. Any guesses? Yeah, you got it. That's right. I'm joined today by the fabulous celebrity chef, Aldo Zilli.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno, Aldo Zilli.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And I'm very pleased to say Aldo has brought food because the way to my heart...
I always bring food.
Well, the way to my heart is through my gut.
I have to bring food. When I come to this station, it's like, food. Do you want to bring any food? Yes.
Lovely, Aldo.
Because it never gets wasted here.
No,
that's what I love.
Everyone, they'll be on me like gannets at the end, but they don't realise I am the worst gannet here. I'll eat all of it. So, Aldo Zilli, talk to me about you then, because you're born in Italy, yeah?
How long have you got?
Yeah, it's great. And you were born in Italy.
I was born in a very small village on the Adriatic coast called Alba Adriatica, and province of Teramo, which is a city in the centre of Italy, in the Abruzzo region. And I'm the youngest of 9.
Wow.
So I grew up with 7 brothers and 1 sister.
Oh, just one sister.
All slept in one bed at one point. Yeah, well, she did. She did. She did, but she ran off in the end because she couldn't cope with all the boys.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, so growing up was, you know, food was always a premium because we didn't really have much. My dad had a farm, but he wouldn't let us eat anything off the farm because he had to sell it to his customers. So, you know, for me, it was quite a struggle, sort of growing up with no food and 7 brothers that didn't really... I mean, I say they didn't like me, but that's what I thought. They didn't like me.
Yeah.
My dad thought I was an accident because I came quite late, and, you know, so it was a bit of a struggle. So I left early. I left early, and I had a stint in Europe, and then I landed in England.
England.
I'm going to cut this short, otherwise it's going to be...
Yeah, we'll hear about your stories of Europe, the stories of Europe, Aldo Zilli. We'll be like... Mate, it's 6 o'clock, we got to go.
I mean, chefing wasn't something that I wanted to do, to be honest. I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be on stage, I wanted to... That was my ambition originally. And but then I landed in the kitchen because it's the only language I could talk.
Really?
When I first came here, you know, I couldn't speak any English. So I thought if I work in a restaurant, in a kitchen, then I can show my skills of cooking, because I learned to cook with my mum. And you never know when you're going to need it, as I say.
Well, you always need cooking.
Yes, so I still do now.
Very, very, very good skill.
Yeah.
And you've cooked for, I mean, where was your first restaurant? And how did you end up at the heady heights of having restaurants in Harvey Nicks? I mean, you have on a Wednesdays you're out there in Harvey Nicks.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I had my first restaurant exactly 40 years ago. I opened my first restaurant in Dean Street. And soon enough, people started coming. But I opened the restaurant by pure chance, because the guy that owned it decided to retire. And he said, give me £500 a week and you can have my restaurant. So I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And I paid him rent every week, and he gave me his restaurant all furnished and everything.
Amazing.
With a few customers. Then, obviously, I brought a lot of people in. Believe it or not, in those days, you couldn't even find olive oil. You couldn't find Italian ingredients.
Never.
You couldn't find... It was hard. It was hard to find good ingredients.
Freddie Mercury was one of your...
Freddie Mercury came a bit later. George Michael was one of the first.
Yeah.
After the Wham final, they all started coming in. And then, you know, one person started talking and all the others started coming. And the restaurant in Dean Street became a little hub for lots of A-lister celebrities for no reason whatsoever.
That was Zilli's, was it?
That was... it wasn't called Zilli then. It was called Il Siciliano. And then Zilli opened after that, down the road. So, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it was... we had the Mafia, we had... Soho. Soho was a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, that's Soho. If anyone doesn't know where Soho is, that's like in central London. It's just, you know, the hub of it near Leicester Square. And...
Village.
Yeah,
I describe it as my village where I grew up, really.
Your manor.
Yeah.
Now, you brought some food. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking,
well,
what have you brought?
I brought a standard lasagna for you, because this is what we used to make in those days. And then this is arancini. This is rice balls filled with bolognese, peas and mozzarella and loads of parmesan, and it's got a nice hot spicy sauce.
Oh, spicy.
Let me cut a little bit of that for you.
I can see myself spilling this on my little...
There you go.
On my little blue dress. It's not spicy. It's not got pepper in it.
No, it's not spicy. What? Don't you like spicy food? Tell me you like spicy food. You're not going to talk and eat at the same time. See, I also got this pizza. Now, in the old days, you had a margherita, you had very few choices of pizza. Nowadays, we make this pizza in the restaurant in Lugarelli in Knightsbridge, and we top it afterwards You know, we make a normal margarita, and then afterwards we put all these lovely ingredients on top.
So what have you got on there?
On top of this, there's a grilled courgettes.
Grilled courgettes, look at that.
There's some...
people, look.
Yeah, there you go.
Look.
There's some mortadella, some rocket.
Everybody's going to be... You know, they're all going to follow me out there for this. They're not... I'm going to put it all in my bag.
They'll have to come and see me on a Wednesday.
That's lovely, because on this pizza you've got... Oh.
Yeah, let me cut it for you again. I can't believe I haven't given you a knife and fork.
No.
How many you meant to...
I usually eat with my hands.
Yeah.
No, this looks delicious. I'll try a bit of that. That looks cheesy.
So, you know, the hospitality industry has moved on immensely since I started here, because now we can get anything we want. You know, we couldn't even get rocket in those days. So now Italy is very close, although it's a bit more difficult now, especially with the Brexit, to get ingredients in. But, you know, we're managing. We're managing all right.
So you even do... Is this a dessert?
This is a tiramisu.
Tiramisu. Is that coffee?
That's a coffee-based tiramisu, yes. Egg, coffee.
I'm not a fan of coffee.
Mascarpone cheese. Do you like that?
I don't like coffee, but that's nice.
You don't like coffee?
No.
No, that's going to wake you up then.
I never drink coffee because I'm quite hyperactive, so that will send me running around.
I'm addicted. I'm the opposite. I'm addicted to coffee, yes.
So what would you say in your career has been one of the most defining moments?
Defining moments was opening the first fish restaurant in London, Zilly Fish. When I opened Zilly Fish, everybody thought it was a bad idea because it was just fish. But actually, that was the most successful restaurant I've ever had.
Yeah, I've
ever opened. And everybody came to that restaurant, and I sold it 15 years ago. But now I'm a consultant, so, you know, people...
You sold it, but you're still...
I like giving back.
Yeah.
So I'm giving back my knowledge to restaurants that need it.
Not for free.
Clients that... Free, the word free doesn't exist. I wouldn't get out of bed otherwise.
No, I totally get it.
No,
and in your cooking, what's the biggest mistake that you would say that you've made? If you were to pick up something and think, oh, God, why did I do that?
Biggest mistake I made, I probably... opening a vegetarian-only restaurant.
Yeah,
that
sounds like a mistake to me.
Well, it wouldn't have been now, but in those days I was one of the first. So it was not a mistake, but it wasn't a great success.
Are you a vegetarian?
Let's put it that way. No, but I do love vegetarian food, and my client Paul McCartney and his family.
Oh wow!
I cooked for them for about 20 years. And he was a regular in this restaurant. So I turned the restaurant that he loved into a vegetarian restaurant. Not because of him, but he had a lot to do with it.
And your view on that sort of food, and veganism in general?
Veganism, I love vegan food. I love vegetarian. I mean, vegan is great, but I don't like the vegan replacements.
Yeah, if it's just stick to what it is, that thing.
Yes.
Instead of... Because I don't like it when they say, oh, vegan chicken. Well, what is it? Just say what it is.
What have you
Tell us
put
what
in
it
it?
is. We want to know what that is.
So that's not good for you?
No, because it's processed. It's...
Yeah.
There's lots of oil in that food as well.
Yeah, fresh food. If you're going to go vegan, lots of fresh food, lots of pulses, lots of protein that you can get from other sources. You don't have to eat meat. But, you know, I mean, pescatarian is my...
I love fish. That's the best.
It's my bag. I can't go vegan or vegetarian.
No, I love fish. Fish is good for you.
I have to eat a bit of it. And also, I'm a chef, so
yeah,
I have to taste every day. I have to taste different foods.
Well, Aldo, listen, I'm so grateful for you to come and talk to me about all this. If people want to find out more about your stuff, what's going on with you? Have you got anything coming up or anything?
Casa Zilli, we have Casa Zilli also in Surrey. The website will tell you everything, casazilli-.com. And I have a lot on the pipeline that I will only talk when I sign on the dotted lines.
Aldo, thank you so much. I think we should leave this food on the table for Danny to see if he can resist touching any of it. And also because I don't want to share it.
I think Danny will wipe this.
Aldo Zilli, thank you very much. Celebrity chef Aldo Zilli, he was my outside guest. Did you guess? Fabulous. Well, listen, stay tuned with us. It's just coming up to 18 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News coming up. I'll have clickbait, or clipbait even, and it's Sadiq Khan's Freudian slip is in the spotlight this week. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Trump right to... is Trump right? Is Starmer right to attack Donald Trump over NATO?
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase, and that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Oh, I'm so happy I've got food. It's lovely. I had to take a load myself because what happens is it'll go out there and I'll never see it again. If you just tuned in, welcome aboard. The reason I'm talking about that is because Aldo Zilli was my outside guest, but now it's fast approaching 21 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was Sir Keir Starmer right to attack Trump on NATO? Now, Sir Keir Starmer has taken a swipe at former US President Donald Trump for criticising NATO members. The Labour leader has pledged that he'd stand up for our allies if he were to become the UK's next Prime Minister. Now, of course, this follows Mr Trump suggesting that he'd encourage Russia to attack any NATO members that failed to spend enough on defence. But with Trump slightly ahead in the polls, was Starmer right to criticise him? Or is he damaging UK-US relations? What do you think? So joining me to discuss this, former advisor to the Bank of England, Dr Roger Gewolb, and Chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Svensson. Well, I'm going to start with you, Greg, seeing as you're Chair of Republicans Overseas. Was he right, Sir Keir Starmer?
The short answer is no. I think he could have been much more constructive. If he's thinking that Trump might be president, he should be a little bit more constructive about it, maybe even suggest that the countries that are not contributing 2% of their GDP to military spending maybe should step up and do it. And that's, you know, obviously NATO is completely dependent on U.S. involvement. So President Trump has a funny way of saying things sometimes, but his point is correct that, you know, with only 11 members of NATO spending 2%, that's just inadequate.
Well, after he said it, after Trump made his comments, a lot of them started to cough up. So whatever he did worked. Roger Gewolb.
Pardon me. Well, I think there are 2 points. One, pardon me, one about the men and the other about the issue. Regarding the men, I think that Keir Starmer, who, when Boris calls him the human bollard, it does kind of...
He called him that?
Yeah.
Not that.
No, he's called him that many times, the human bollard, and it does ever so slightly resonate. The thing being that he's now trying to make, at least with the anti-Semitism issue, a show of himself as a stronger leader, a bit of a strongman. Whether he'll carry that through if he's elected, I don't know. Whether we'll have Jeremy Corbyn, whom he tried to get elected twice, of course, appear from the woodwork is anybody's guess. But he's trying to put on a show of strength, and I think he killed it all by criticizing former President Trump for doing one of his usual theatrics to get some results, which he always seems to do. Moving to the issue, I think that it's just absolutely unacceptable for these countries not to meet their commitments and yet expect to be defended. I don't support Trump in saying that he would encourage Putin to attack them. But I do support him in scaring the pants off of them. I mean, as I've said on other programs, if you belong to, do you belong to a club? Does the club let members in who don't pay their dues? Why is the UK the only country with the United States counterattacking the Houthis, for example? I think it's shameful.
I mean, that's a shocker that others aren't stepping in and getting involved in that and actually protecting the interests of those in the West, which is what America are doing. And the Houthis are thugs and pirates. Even actually at the pro-Palestine protests, people were in support of Houthis. I mean, this is how crazy it's gone.
Yeah,
but,
really.
What gets me is, though, you both seem to equally criticise Trump for the way he said it, but I don't criticise him. I think he's absolutely spot on, because what happened after he said it that way, a lot of them have stepped up.
Sure.
So
it went from
what other way could he say it? And he's not even the president.
Yeah, well, he started this in 2017 when there was only 5 countries meeting the commitment, and then they moved up to 11. So progress. It's better than nothing. So good for him. And if he says it in an unfiltered way, that's just Trump's nature. And so he's not always perfect with the delivery, but the point is absolutely correct. And
I didn't criticize him at all. I simply said that he might not have said I would encourage Putin. All the rest, he's absolutely right.
Well, I don't know. What does Neil Hamilton think of that? He's joining us now. He's a UKIP leader. He's there in Wiltshire. Neil Hamilton, your thoughts on this? Was Trump right? And actually, even the way he said it as well.
Yeah, I think Trump was absolutely spot on the button. These European countries have been freeloading off the United States for decades. And now that the geopolitical plates are moving in different directions with the rise of China, the US is inevitably going to concentrate more on the Far East than they are in Europe, where we are mature democracies. Some of the richest countries in the world can well afford to pay for our own defense in alliance with the United States. There's no reason whatever for anybody to fail to meet the NATO commitments. I mean, the US is spending 3.5% of its GDP on defence. Britain only barely spends 2%. I don't think we're spending enough in this country, even though we meet our NATO commitment.
Well, and Greg is nodding his head there. Neil, just to briefly ask you then, do you think Trump's delivery was acceptable, though? Because that's the other side of it. People are talking about the delivery and the way he said it, and the threat towards Putin should attack the other countries that don't pay it.
Well, I mean, Trump is not a sort of polished Oxford Union debater, is he? So he's a rough, tough property magnate from New York. And you mustn't expect the kind of manners that you would expect from Oxford or Cambridge students in a debating chamber. You just have to accept that's the nature of the man. Well, he knows what gets results. The Art of the Deal is his book, and it's written as a result of his own experience.
He did it. And I've realised I've done deals using the Art of the Deal without even knowing it, so I'm good too. Right, let's bring on Nigel Nelson as well, because Nigel Nelson, they're coming in from all over, aren't they? There we go. Nigel Nelson, your thoughts then. Was Trump, the delivery some people are complaining about, but was he right? And was Keir Starmer right to then sort of attack him for it?
What he said was clearly wrong, that you don't encourage Russia to attack a NATO member. Where he was right originally was absolutely that of course people should pay up what they owe. What NATO is, it's a club. It's there to defend us all. And as with all clubs, there are membership fees that if you want to continue, you have to actually stump up. So Britain's been very good on this. Back in 2014, when the 2% defence target was set, us and the Americans and Greece were the only ones to pay the money. As you just said, that now we're up to 11 of 31 members, but even so, that's only a third. So it is quite right for Trump to get angry about America having to fund Europe's defence umbrella, but don't go around telling Putin to go and attack a European country.
But it wasn't. But you and I know that wasn't a literal meaning. You knew. I mean, like, come on, let's not pretend here that we're stupid. That wasn't a literal meaning. That was a play, and it was a tactic. And I'm quite clear that that's what he was saying. I find it incredible that people want to take this out of its context. But Nigel Nelson, very quickly, was Keir Starmer right then to sort of comment and criticise Trump?
Yes, I think he was. I mean, bear in mind, he didn't mention Trump by name. But again, yes, I do think the criticism is right. That Keir Starmer's going to have to work with whoever is the American president. It could well be Donald Trump later on this year. I think it's not a bad thing to lay down a marker saying, hang on, let's get the language right, but broadly we will be agreeing with you about the amount of money people should pay into NATO.
Yeah, but it just doesn't seem very wise of him. He could have done it differently. I mean, if we're talking about people doing things differently, Keir Starmer perhaps should have done things differently.
May I make one quick
I'm going to come to you, Roger Gewell, the final word to you. Was he right? And what are you going to say, Roger?
One other thing I'd like to say very quickly is that I also picked up what I thought was a bit of a dog whistle in Keir Starmer's fulsome and almost obsequious reactions and body language with the Europeans. It made me wonder where this is all positioning him to ask them to let us back in and tear up Brexit.
Yeah, you know, that's where we all probably end up. So do you think, then I'll ask you, Roger, yes or no, was Keir Starmer right to criticise Trump?
You're asking me?
Yeah, yes or no?
No, absolutely wrong. I think it hurt him when he's trying to show himself as being a stronger leader.
Greg Sensen?
No, ma'am.
No. Neil Hamilton?
Big mistake. And
Nigel Nelson?
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. All right, thank you so much for your thoughts. Brilliant. Roger Gewell, Chair, Republicans Overseas, Greg Svensson, leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and also GBNews political commentator Nigel Nelson. Thank you so much. Right, so what do you think? gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 31 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was Sir Keir Starmer right to attack Trump over his NATO comments? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and Christian Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news with Ray.
Thanks, Nana. 31 minutes past 5, our top stories. Avon and Somerset Police have referred themselves to the independent police watchdog after arresting a 42-year-old woman on suspicion of murder following the deaths of 3 children in Bristol. Officers attended a concern for welfare call in Blaze Walk in Sea Mills this afternoon. They say the suspect is currently in police custody at a hospital. The force said it was contacting the IOPC due to prior police contact. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza during a speech at the Scottish Labour conference. It's a change to his previous stance of a pause in the fighting, saying instead the war must stop now. He also said that a two-state solution must be back on the table. In the United States, President Biden has assured Ukraine that military aid will be delivered. That's despite delays that he's blaming on Republicans. The White House says inaction by the GOP allowed Russia to capture the eastern city of Avdiivka yesterday. Comes as some Republicans cast doubt on the US's future support for Ukraine. Senator J.D. Vance says that Europe must get used to the US being less involved in the region. And 2 people have been charged by police and will appear in court after a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London yesterday. One is accused of failing to remove a face covering and the other obstructing a constable. It comes after tens of thousands of protesters marched through the Irish, Scottish and English capitals in major demonstrations against the war in Gaza. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. 33 after 5. Coming up on Clipbait with Sadiq Khan's Freudian slip. You'll be seeing that. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking you, what do you think? Was Sir Keir Starmer right to criticise Trump? Don't go anywhere.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. This is GB News. If you've just tuned in, where on earth have you been? There's only 21 minutes to go-ish. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. And it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was Keir Starmer right to attack Trump over NATO? And Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has pledged that he'd stand up for our allies if he were to become Prime Minister. And this follows Mr Trump suggesting that he'd encourage Russia to attack any NATO members that failed to spend enough on defence. But some have argued that Starmer's actions could threaten UK-US relations, seeing as Trump is likely to be the next president and Starmer likely to be the next Prime Minister. So I'm asking, was Starmer right to attack Trump over NATO? Well, joining me to discuss that, author and broadcaster Christian Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly.
Look, I mean, Keir Starmer is tapping into the left of his party who loathe Donald Trump. I think 5 or 6 years ago when Trump was invited over with the pomp and the ceremony afforded to him, and the Speaker of the House of Commons was spouting off and gobbing off, and you had all of these...
Burko.
Yeah, and you had all of these lefty MPs saying he shouldn't be. It was a disgrace. It was an absolute scandal. And I'm not one to use the cliche virtue signalling, but that was a great example of virtue signalling. And here we go again. Anti-Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump was inviting Russia to invade any NATO country whatsoever. He was speaking metaphorically, and he was trying to drive home a point that he's been making. When he was in power, I remember he had the great and the good, all the European leaders or the NATO leaders, and he was saying, you need to start paying your way, pal. And it's something that he's got a bee in his bonnet about this. I didn't realise that the Yanks paid 3%. I thought everyone just paid the 2 and a bit percent or whatever it was.
Pay 2%.
Correct.
And after he said it, a lot of them started to pay their 2%, so it obviously worked.
Yeah, and also this is from someone who's not actually in power.
Exactly.
For someone who's not in power, he's got so much power.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. So was Starmer right? I don't think he was right. I just think once again he's just reminded himself how many people loathe Trump.
Yeah.
It's unnecessary.
Christine Hamilton.
He was 100% wrong. I mean, he's alienating the person who is most likely to be the next leader of the Western world. If you were in a mess, in a war, in a pickle, who would you want on your side? The USA or the French? No contest. And it is ridiculous. And as people have said in different ways, you know, if you don't pay your insurance dues, you're not going to get cover when the roof blows off. But listen, it isn't just Starmer. I unearthed this quote. This is what David Lammy, if you can believe it, he is set to be our Foreign Secretary when Lord Cameron has to move over. He described Trump as a woman-hating, neo-Nazi, sympathising sociopath. This is the man who is, seriously, who is going to be our next Foreign Secretary. And to alienate the states like that, I mean, it's absolute and utter madness. And of course these other countries in NATO have to start paying their dues. Why should the states pay for us? Why should they?
Also, what David Lammy said, he did say that, I'll trust that you've taken that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're quite eloquent and you're perfectly intelligent. So, you know, they are alienating those that could potentially help us. I don't think it's wise, in terms of diplomacy, to be insulting your allies in that way. No, and we need America, and the point that Donald Trump made was correct. He was right, wasn't he?
Yeah, but Trump was clumsy. You could equally argue that Trump's clumsy and his rhetoric's unnecessary. Look, I don't hate Donald Trump one bit, but you could equally argue that he needs to rein it in a little bit as well with his rhetoric.
Yeah, but it worked. It worked. Just sleeping.
So since he said that, which countries have started chiselling in a few more quid?
About 30 countries have now chipped in or something, so a lot of them are chipped in now. So since he said that, there's been action. So that's the point.
Has there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely, yes. Yes, it has.
Yes, it's worked.
It has.
Well, I'm not sure there are even 30 countries in NATO.
Well, whatever. But I can't remember. But how many countries are in NATO? We'll get our producer to check that for us.
But I take your point, though.
No, they have definitely. They've been shamed.
Here's a pub quiz question for you. Do you know why NATO never helped out the Brits with the Falklands?
Why did NATO never...
Think about it.
It's going to be bad.
No, because it's the North Atlantic. The Falklands was in the South Atlantic. Or in a different region completely. No, it's only if a member is attacked in the North Atlantic. It's a geographical thing.
So I didn't know that.
How many?
31. So in my head, I'm thinking there are 31 countries.
You're right.
But
but that's the point.
Well, once again, you've scuppered
the unbreakable commitment that all the NATO countries have made is that it's one of them.
Word on everything. Sorry, Christine.
I'm going to have the last word. Listen, this show's nothing without you and your views. They're just babbling, the two of them. So let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they really think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4 of you. I'm going to start with Julie Ford in Bedfordshire. Julie Ford, was Keir Starmer right to have a go at Trump or kind of drop in a slight sort of insult?
No, absolutely not. And I think he's done it from across the water because otherwise he'd be a bit scared to say it to his face. But I think, I agree with Danny and Christine. At the end of the day, these are our allies. If you start poking the bear, where is that going to end up and where is that going to leave us? The thing with Trump, a lot of people don't like him, but what is it about him that they don't like? For me, he's somebody who's come into politics from a business perspective. So he has a business mind. So he has done something for a reaction because he wanted something to happen, to get done. He needed these people to pay. Haven't seen Keir Starmer getting people to pay. All of a sudden, Trump says something, they paid.
They pay, exactly. Whose method is working, Trump or Starmer? It's Trump. Let's go to Gareth Wynne-Jones. He's there in Snowdonia. Gareth.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? If Keir comes in, how's he going to face Donald Trump if he becomes the president? That should be an interesting first meeting. The Americans are our friends and we need to keep them closer and closer because it's tricky times now. We have to stick together. And I think, people are trying to push the left and the right divide, while the majority of people are just middle of the road. And I think this is really important. We have to watch how people push these narratives because it causes major problems. And whoever is voted into America or to Great Britain, they should take control and start bringing together to build a better Britain and America.
Agreed. Jackie Sampson, you're there in St Albans. Jackie.
Hello. I don't view it as an attack because it wasn't direct, but without a doubt, from a diplomatic point of view, it was very clumsy. However, I don't think Keir Starmer is wrong to air concerns that an alliance should be about an alliance supporting each other. But then again, Donald Trump is right in saying everybody should be paying their way.
Good point there. David Barham in Watford. David.
I just think it's another bit of postulating by Keir Starmer because he thinks he can flex his muscle, so he's going to be the next Prime Minister. I think he thinks himself the same character in Love, actually, as the Prime Minister who stood up to the Americans as nasty people, forgetting they have always been the posse of the world. They've gone in and support everyone, and we do need to support each other in NATO and stop peeing off people. He's doing it again now. He says, oh, everyone's upset with me, I'm going to support a ceasefire because everyone's upset with me and I'll lose the Muslim vote. So he's trying to find vote any way and every way.
Yeah, well, you try and please everyone, you please no one, and then you lose everyone, and that's what's going on there. Listen, thank you so much to you, Julie Ford from Bedfordshire, Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia, Jackie Sampson from St Albans and David Bourne in Watford. Thank you so much. Right, well, listen, stay tuned. Coming up, clickbait, and this time it's Sadiq Khan who's in the spotlight. And, of course, it'll be time for Supplement Sunday where Danny and Christine will give me some of their favourite stories of the week. That's on the way.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast-acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So welcome back. Right now, I'm Nana Akua. Tomorrow I might be somebody else. But we are live here on GB News, 49 minutes after 5 o'clock. And it's time for Clipbait. And this week, the clip that caught my eye, the Conservatives were quick to pounce on as Sadiq Khan's Freudian slip became apparent. Have a listen.
I'm only going upon what I've read in the media, so I've not seen the transcripts, but as far as I'm concerned, that sort of language isn't acceptable, and it certainly shouldn't be acceptable in a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist but also anti-Semitic.
And we'll come back to some...
No, but we should have played the other bit because he actually then says, oh, no, and he corrects himself, just to let you know. So, yeah, so that's what he said.
Freud had a point, didn't he?
Then he did correct himself. But not after he sort of went back to the presenter. I think that was a clip on the BBC. And then he corrected himself. Danny, that was a bit of a...
Many a true word said in jest. Not that that was in jest. And you're going back to Freud all those years ago.
Well, he had a point, didn't he? Freudian slip, if ever I saw one or heard one.
So that's sort of... He seems to be like a cat with 1,000 lives because his latest new renaming of the tube lines, the Windrush line...
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, everybody can make a mistake. I can't remember who it was. There's some BBC presenter got Jeremy Hunt's name wrong.
Yeah, but that's...
What did they call him?
Well, no, we can't say that.
You know perfectly well, Danny.
End of the show, and
Stop
you
being
as well.
naughty.
You'll be sent off. Right, well, listen, now it's time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. Let's start with, joining me, Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly. I'm going to start with you, Christine Hamilton.
Well, this, I mean, honestly, if it was April, I'd think it was a fool. Avanti, the trained people who should be running trains, they have taken it in their head to issue a menopausal pack to people that they think are menopausal or perimenopausal. I am not making this up. The pack includes a fan, handy for hot sweats, a jelly baby in case you feel like biting someone's head off, tissue if you're feeling a bit emotional, a paper clip to help you keep it all together, a tea bag because tea makes everything better, a pencil to write down the things you might forget, and a penny to bring you good luck. I mean, this is unbelievable. They're supposed to be operating trains and they're dishing this patronising garbage out to women that they think, well, we'll be giving it to men too shortly. It's just unbelievable.
I know, it's absurd.
It's an April Fool. It's just patronising rubbish.
Yeah, Danny Kelly.
OK, the most horrible breed of dog ever created by man, XL Bully, and it was genetically modified by man. OK, a bloodlust dog. These things are the devil incarnate. I hate the damn things. Oh. And even with a muzzle, it's managed to sort of remove its muzzle and attack a horse, and the horse has been violently ripped apart.
Oh,
and this thing had a muzzle on. Now, the law says you've got to... Oh. The muzzle! It got past the muzzle.
It got through the muzzle?
It got through the muzzle. And, of course, you know how sensitive horses are? Oh. Horses are the most sensitive animal ever. And to be attacked by something that is chomping at your knees and everything...
So how's the horse? Is the horse OK?
No, the horse is... It's not going to be put down or anything, but it's in a bad way. It's in a bad way anyway. So that's the XL Bully, and the owners obeying the law, walking the damn thing with a muzzle. The damage it can do with a muzzle.
It's unbelievable. I don't think
horrible dog.
Be allowed to have that dog.
Horrible.
It's like an animal, really, but it's like a wild animal. It's like having a lion in your house.
Yeah.
Well, this one, Paul Duttridge talked about in my supplement, is Donald Trump who's promoting his gold never surrender high-top trainers for $399.
Brilliant.
Because obviously they've tried to cap his way of making money, and he's literally on for about $500 million. So he's now set this up at $399. Would you buy a pair, Danny?
No, but when I come down to London every Sunday, I see lots of people who would walk around in a pair of these trainers. They're ghastly. It's the sort of thing that I think in London you'd see. I don't think you'd see them in other parts of the country.
I can see a lot of people in England buying... They might not buy them because they've got the Trump on them, but would buy gold trainers. Gosh, yes.
Bright gold trainers.
Especially with flashing lights on the bottom.
But he never ceases to amaze me with his innovation.
Extraordinary.
And I think he's absolutely right. I'm going to buy myself a pair if I can find some money, because they never surrender. They're bright gold. They're emblazoned with a T, American flag, detailing on the back and a red and white sole. And he's hopeful that he can make a sneaker con on his way to political rally to promote his new branded footwear. So his plan is obviously to raise some money to pay for, actually keep financing his campaign as well, because they're literally trying to stop him from doing that. Anyone who's listening on radio, we actually have Trump there with his new trainers. I think they're quite fetching.
I think they're great. I mean, I think they're lovely gold trainers. I don't know I want a pair with Trump on them, but I wouldn't mind a pair with a Union flag on, never mind an American.
David Lammy a pair.
Oh, don't.
He would suit them.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to a serious point, there are some people who just have this pathological disposition towards hating the guy, and it's just so, you know, yes, he's done things, but please, you know, objectively, he could be the president. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
Well, Biden hasn't exactly excelled
I'm
himself,
just going to read this one from Les in Newcastle. Les,
why, man?
We love Les. He says, Trump was indeed so very much correct in his strong words about NATO members coughing up. His last speak up was about Russian gas in Germany, and look how that turned out. Well, Trump was right, wasn't he, when it came to that as well. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts as well, but I've lost a lot of my messages.
Is that an emoji of a poop?
Yeah, I was getting that ready for Jim Dale. It's a surprise when he says something ridiculous.
We've kind of got a bit used to Trump now, haven't we? I mean, when he first started with his extraordinary outbursts and everything, we really were quite shocked. But now you just think, well, that's Trump.
Well, it's a bit like Simon Cowell when he did the X Factor and then he told people how bad they were in America. I can remember when they first watched that, they were like, oh, my God! And now we've got used to it. People have accepted you can be criticised. Yeah. And that's the way it goes.
Yeah. We've got over the shock.
Do you think Biden's going to be the nomination for the Democrats?
He's going to go all the... My very well-informed view, of course. He's going to go all the way through the process, because if they pull him now, they get Kamala Harris, and they don't want that. They're going to put him all the way through. Then they will suddenly realise, my goodness, he's not up to it physically.
Right, well, listen, thank you very much for that, Christine.
He will not be the candidate.
Thank you so much to my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Thank you so much, Christine. You do this every time. That's not Christine, that's Danny. Author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I talk too much every
Danny
time.
Kelly, and thank you to you at home for your company. I look forward to seeing you same time, same place, next week at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Don't forget to follow us live on YouTube. I'll leave you with the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Marco Pitagna. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office. We hold on to unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days, all seeing some rain at times, but staying mild for the time being at least. This weather front's pushed outbreaks of rain away from the southeast of England during the course of the afternoon, so we've got a ridge of high pressure building in from the west, quietening things down for the overnight period, but further rains gathering out towards the west, and that will move in across the far northwest of the UK as we head into the overnight period. Elsewhere though, showers will tend to ease through the evening. We'll see lots of clear weather, turning quite misty though, with some fog patches across parts of Wales and the southwest of England during the early hours. Following on from that rain band, we'll see showers turning quite blustery there towards the far northwest by the morning. Quite a mild night, temperatures down to 4 or 5 degrees across rural parts of Scotland, but elsewhere holding up in the high single figures. As for Monday, well, outbreaks of rain continue their journey southeastwards across England and Wales, weakening all the while, so giving some patchy rain across the far southeast into the afternoon. Elsewhere, it's a day of sunshine with a few showers around, those showers quite blustery towards the north and west of Scotland. But once again, it's a mild day for the time of year. Temperatures mostly in double figures, 9 or 10 degrees at best in the north, up to 13 or 14 Celsius down towards the southeast. As for Tuesday, well, further wet and windy weather will move in across the northwest of the UK. Towards the south and east, though, it's a quieter picture, a bit breezy, but plenty of sunshine around and staying quite mild for the time of year. Outbreaks of rain move their way southeastwards later on Tuesday, and it then stays quite unsettled on Wednesday and Thursday, but turning colder towards the north later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.